Chapter 1140. In the back garden of the Peerless sect, Shangguan Mei Yang walked out of her room and wandered aimlessly in the garden. She stared at the garden full of immortal flowers and herbs, and gradually became entranced. Miss! Just then, a servant girl walked over and called out to Shangguan Mei Yang, but Shangguan Mei Yang did not respond. She could not help but raise her voice and shout again, "Miss!" Shangguan Mei Yang's delicate body trembled. She regained her senses, looked at the person beside her, and said, "It's Xiao Yu, what's wrong?" The servant girl called Xiao Yu looked at Shangguan Mei Yang strangely, then bowed and said, "Miss, you asked this servant to go to young Master Su's room." This servant went, but young Master Su seems to be still in closed-door cultivation and has not come out. Is that so? A trace of disappointment flashed across Shangguan Mei Yang's eyes. "Miss, do you want someone to go in and inform young Master Su that Miss has something to discuss with him?" Xiao Yu asked carefully. "How can I disturb someone else's cultivation? Furthermore, I have nothing to look for him for." Shangguan Mei Yang shook her head. "Then miss, let this servant go find young Master Su, nothing." Shangguan Mei Yang seemed to be too lazy to explain, and directly said, "Xiao Yu, there's nothing else here, you can leave first." Xiao Yu naturally did not dare to say anything more and immediately bowed. "Yes, this servant will take her leave." With that, she left. But just as she retreated to the intersection, a person walked over. Seeing that, Xiao Yu immediately bowed and respectfully called out, "Young Master Liang." The person who came was Liang Haotian. But he did not look at the servant girl. His gaze was locked onto Shangguan Mei Yang, who was standing in front of a dark orchid. Looking at the graceful figure, Liang Haotian's eyes flashed with greed. This was the immortal world, but not all of the people here were qualified to be immortals. Those who had climbed up from being mortals to immortals step by step, whether it was in terms of strength or temperament, they were all very solid and powerful. These immortals were true immortals. However, in the immortal world, there were also many false immortals, such as people who used magic treasures, materials, or even immortal coins to forcefully raise their cultivation, pulling them into the spirit profound immortal realm. This kind of person's temperament was unable to keep up. He only had strength, but no temperament. This was a false immortal. Strictly speaking, Su Yun had some signs of being a false immortal. As for this Liang Haotian, he was a true false immortal, and had been raised to the spirit profound immortal realm by his father, Liang Xian, using materials and a large amount of celestial coins. The current him, even if his temperament was not strong, it was difficult for him to control women, and when he saw Shangguan Mei Yang, he had a strange feeling that his soul had been hooked away. It was like love at first sight, but it was also not like it. He could not describe the feeling. He only knew that ever since he saw Shangguan Mei Yang, his heart had always been imprinted with this beautiful young lady, and he secretly swore that he would definitely obtain this young lady. Probably hearing Xiao Yu's voice, Shangguan Mei Yang turned her head slightly and glanced at him. Just this glance caused Liang Haotian to be stunned on the spot, as though he had been petrified. Seeing Liang Haotian's expression, Shangguan Mei Yang frowned, but she did not reveal her displeasure. Instead, she bowed to Liang Haotian from afar and said, "Greetings, young Master Liang." After all, he was the son of the third stage profound envoy of the immortal court. Even Ao Wushuang had to give him face. When the heavenly voice entered Liang Haotian's ears, he could not help but tremble, and he suddenly woke up. Seeing that Shangguan Mei Yang was talking to him, he immediately smiled and walked over. "Mei Yang, are you admiring the flowers here?" "I'm just strolling around." Shangguan Mei Yang said indifferently. "What's the matter, young Master Liang?" "Sigh, Mei Yang, my father and your father are brothers, so you and I are siblings. Why are you still calling me young Master Liang, young Master Liang? From now on, I'll call you Sister Yang. You can call me Brother Tian, how about it? After all, we're family," Liang Haotian said with a dissatisfied tone. Shangguan Meiyang frowned. She did not know how to reply, so she chose to remain silent. In the end, Liang Haotian did not dare to push too hard, so he did not delve deeper into the topic. Instead, he continued to smile and said, "Sister Yang, where have you been all this time? Your brother Tian, I have been waiting for you here. Uncle Ao said that you went out with your friends to gain experience. Is it that guy called Su Yun?" "Yes." Shangguan Meiyang nodded. Where did you go to train? How did your cultivation rise so quickly? I can't even see through your cultivation right now." Liang Haotian laughed. "I just had some fortuitous encounters. My cultivation didn't increase by much." "Is that so? But Sister Yang, that Su Yun, what is his background?" "I asked Uncle Ao, but he didn't say much. He didn't know much about that Su Yun, and said he was your friend." Just then, Liang Haotian came over and asked softly, "Su Yun?" Shangguan Meiyang looked at Liang Haotian strangely, then said indifferently, "He's just someone from a small immortal sect. I met him when I was living in the Sky Martial Continent in the past. He can be considered an old friend." "Someone from the Sky Martial Continent?" Hearing that, the corner of Liang Haotian's mouth raised into a disdainful smile. "So he's someone from an inferior realm." "Inferior realm?" Shangguan Meiyang was immediately displeased. Seeing that, Liang Haotian knew that he had said the wrong thing, and immediately waved his hand to explain. "Sister Yang, I didn't mean that. I wasn't talking about you, that. Young Master Liang, if there's nothing else, then forgive me for taking my leave. I'm a little tired, so I'll go rest first. Goodbye." Shangguan Meiyang snorted lightly and left. Liang Haotian immediately chased after him, but Shangguan Meiyang ignored him and went straight into the house. Su Yun stayed in the Peerless sect for 2 days. In these 2 days, he had been meditating in the training grounds, and only after 2 days did he walk out of the training ground. Of course, it was not because he had gained some enlightenment and had finished recuperating, but because of the news from the Round Demon. Back then, when he parted ways with the Sword Ancestor had told Su Yun how to find him. Su Yun had told the Round Demon about this method, and it was much easier for the Round Demon to find him. The result was not out of Su Yun's expectations. The current Sword Ancestor was still in the ultimate martial world, and from the looks of it, he had probably not finished collecting his soul. Su Yun had the Round Demon continue to lock onto the Sword Ancestor's location, and at the same time, he packed up and prepared to leave the immortal realm and head to the ultimate martial world. "Young Master Su, you've come out of seclusion?" Not long after Su Yun walked out of the training grounds, the 5 disciples of the Peerless sect immediately came over to welcome him. "Young Master Su, do you need anything else?" "No need, you guys can leave." Su Yun laughed, sent the 5 of them away, and then started to stroll around. He planned to look for Shangguan Meiyang first, say goodbye to her, and then directly bid farewell to Ao Wushuang. Unexpectedly, not long after he walked out, a few young men walked over from the small path in front of him. The person in the lead was the young master of the Immortal Court's mysterious envoy, Liang Haotian. Today, Liang Haotian was dressed very beautifully. He was dressed in white and held a fan in his hand. He was elegant and handsome, and indeed had the demeanor of a young master of an immortal family. However, his eyes were not as gentle as an ordinary young master's. The way Liang Haotian looked at Su Yun was not only thorny, it was as if it was filled with poison. He bumped into this guy the moment he came out. Was he unlucky, or had this guy always sent people to guard his door? Su Yun thought to himself. Yo? Isn't this young Master Su? Young Master Su has come out of seclusion? I wonder if your cultivation has broken through? Has your realm increased? You should be very powerful now, right? Liang Haotian snorted and walked over. He made a weird sound. He had long found Su Yun to be an eyesore, adding on the matter of Shangguan Meiyang. He was extremely pained by this man, if not for the fact that he could not flare up in the Peerless sect. If they were outside, he would have already taken action. Although he could not see through Su Yun's cultivation, he believed that this guy was only stronger than him by 1 or 2 stages, and was useless. Even if he could defeat him, he could not defeat the experts around him, and even more so, he could not defeat the immortal court behind him. Sigh, what bad luck. I met a dog the moment I went out. Su Yun pretended not to see Liang Haotian, sighed and said, What did you say? Liang Haotian was so angry that he stomped his feet. The immortals behind him shouted angrily, How dare you insult my young master? See if I don't teach you a lesson. With that, he was about to rush forward. What are you doing? Su Yun immediately shouted, You want to admit that you are dogs. Those people froze. Liang Haotian looked at Su Yun strangely and said, What do you mean? Please don't think too much, okay? When I said I met a dog, I really met a dog. Su Yun pointed behind Liang Haotian and the rest, only to realize that not far away, there was a lion dog with green fur lying on the grass. It was lazily sleeping on the grass. It should be raised by a disciple of the Peerless sect. Although it was a lion dog, it was still a dog. Seeing the dog, Liang Haotian's face turned ugly. TSK? Do you all think that I am talking about you? Su Yun chuckled. Everyone has such a thought in their hearts, right? However, how could a normal person mistake himself for a dog? This is an illness, it is better for everyone to treat it. You! Bastard! Liang Haotian's face flushed red. He was so angry that he almost flew into a rage. He clenched his teeth, pointed at Su Yun and bellowed, Su Yun! Don't be complacent, don't think that with Uncle Ao protecting you, you can be lawless, let me tell you. This is the immortal world, my place. If I want you to live, you can live. I want you to die. The immortal I in your body will never produce immortal qi tomorrow. Are you threatening me? Su Yun retracted his smile and said indifferently. Yes, so what? Liang Haotian said. He stared at Su Yun without any trace of politeness, but at that moment, he realized that Su Yun's expression had suddenly changed, and his eyes had become rather terrifying. What was going on? This guy. Chapter 1141. Faced with Liang Haotian's threatening words, Su Yun's heart instantly turned cold. He did not like being threatened by others. No matter who it was, as long as they threatened him, he would completely lose all pity for that person, leaving only killing intent and enmity. Su Yun did not say a word and turned to leave. Liang Haotian stared at him coldly and did not stop him. However, Liang Haotian seemed to have lost interest in tangling with Su Yun. He waved his hand, and the people behind him immediately walked over. Is Swift Blade immortal here? Liang Haotian asked. Young master sent the message. How can he not come? Coincidentally, he was sent by master to handle some matters nearby. I think he should have already entered Peerless sect's territory. The people at the side immediately replied respectfully. Immediately send someone to tell Swift Blade Immortal. Tell him not to enter Peerless sect to pay his respects to me. Tell him to wait outside. When Su Yun leaves, I will cripple that bastard. Liang Haotian said gloomily. The people at the side immediately bowed, and very quickly, one of them left. Su Yun, who had already walked far away, naturally did not know of Liang Haotian's plans, and was currently walking towards Shangguan Mei Yang's cultivation pavilion. Along the way, the disciples who saw him would greet him seriously, although many did not know him very well, but seeing how sect leader Ao Wu Shuang treated him with respect, they knew that he was not an ordinary person. The servant Xiao Yu who was guarding outside the pavilion immediately saw Su Yun. She was startled for a moment, then anxiously turned and ran into the house. Su Yun saw it from afar and was puzzled. Not long later, the servant Xiao Yu ran out again, and anxiously walked in front of Su Yun and bowed. Greetings, young Master Su. Where is your family's young miss? Su Yun asked. Young miss is in the house. She knows that young master has come. She said that if you came, you can just go in. Oh, okay. Su Yun nodded, and did not argue, and walked straight into the house. Shangguan Mei Yang's pavilion was meticulously built for her by a female elder of the Peerless sect. The pavilion was exceptionally exquisite. It used jade as the foundation, forged gold as the bones, the roof tiles were made of black diamonds, and the windows were all engraved with arrays. Looking from afar, it was extremely beautiful, causing people to be amazed. The door was pushed open, releasing a clear sound. Following that, a burst of fragrance assaulted his nose. Su Yun took a few sniffs, and looked inside, only to see that the decorations inside were extremely exquisite. Bookshelves, tables, chairs, and medicine furnaces were all there. The ground here was not laid with arrays, but the house was not small, and there were a few tightly shut rooms. Presumably the array seal used for cultivation were in those rooms. Shangguan Mei Yang was originally sitting on a chair, reading an immortal book. Seeing Su Yun coming over, she closed the book and stood up. "Su Yun, have you come out?" She revealed a smile and asked. Today, Shangguan Mei Yang was dressed very beautifully. She was dressed in light red clothes, and there was a light white phoenix pattern on her clothes. A purple belt was wrapped around her waist, and a dark green jade pendant swayed along with her movements. Her pink hair was tied into a beautiful phoenix feather bun. It made her seemingly young and beautiful face look a little more mature. Su Yun was startled for a moment, then laughed. "Yes, Miss Shangguan, looking at your complexion, you should have absorbed most of the power of the immortal pool. If that's the case, I can rest assured." "Did you come here just to check on my condition?" Shangguan Mei Yang asked in a gentle voice. "Yes, you are Qing Er's master, so I will naturally put in more effort." Su Yun did not think too much, and directly said what was in his heart. Shangguan Mei Yang was startled, her face flushed red. No one knew what she was thinking. "All right, Miss Shangguan, since the matter is over, Su Yun should take his leave. There are still many things that I need to settle, so I will not stay in Peerless sect for long. Today, I am here to bid farewell to you." Su Yun went straight to the point. "You're leaving?" The happiness in Shangguan Mei Yang's heart did not last long, and was replaced by disappointment. "Yes, Miss Shangguan, please take care," Su Yun said, then turned around. Seeing that, Shangguan Mei Yang immediately threw away the book in her hands, wanting to chase after him. Her cherry lips opened, but no sound came out. In the end, she watched Su Yun leave. After a long time, she sighed deeply, and closed her eyes. After bidding farewell to Shangguan Mei Yang, Su Yun went to the main hall, where Ao Wushuang and Shangguan Qingqing were already waiting for him. Probably guessing that Su Yun was preparing to leave, Ao Wushuang specially ordered people to prepare many gifts, piling them up in the main hall. When Su Yun entered, the two of them stood up and bowed to Su Yun, greeting him. "Sect Leader Ao, Palace Master Shangguan." Su Yun cupped his fists and returned the greeting. "Yes." Ao Wushuang nodded, looked at Su Yun, and asked, "Su Yun, are you planning to leave?" "Let's not talk anymore. Since that's the case, I won't hold you back. Although Peerless sect has a few acres of land, it's still too small. It can't accommodate Su Yun." Ao Wushuang said somewhat self-deprecatingly. "Sect Leader Ao, you're too polite." Su Yun smiled. "Su Yun, although we haven't known each other for a long time, we have a lot of connections. This time, my daughter was able to obtain such a great fortune, all thanks to you. This is actually not only my daughter's fortune, it is also my, Ao Wushuang's, and the Peerless sect's fortune. Here I, Wushuang, would like to express my respect to you, Su Yun." Ao Wushuang bowed to Su Yun very seriously. Su Yun was a little dazed. He watched as Ao Wushuang stood up, clapped his hands, and the prepared gifts were presented one by one. "Su Yun is an almighty being, you've seen many things. The rare treasures you've seen are not something that Peerless sects can compare to, but I really can't take out anything that's too miraculous. These are already the best treasures and materials that Peerless sect can give you. It's just a small gift that I've prepared for you, Su Yun. Please don't treat me as an outsider." Ao Wushuang said. "Sect Leader Ao, you're too polite. I'm not treating you as an outsider, it's my intention. Wushuang knows that an almighty being like Su Yun will not be able to help much in the future, so I can give you some compensation now. Ao Wushuang said. He could not imagine what kind of person could obtain the celestial pool water. In fact, when he heard that Su Yun had brought Shangguan Meiyang back, he was a little confused and anxious, because at that time, he thought of the possibility of them failing and getting injured. He never thought that they would succeed in obtaining the celestial pool water. After all, that place was most likely controlled by the Immortal Court, and there were also experts from other sects. To obtain the right to use the celestial pool from these people was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even Peerless sect could do it. He even felt regret in his heart many times, regretting allowing Shangguan Meiyang to follow Su Yun. But the truth was beyond his imagination. Not only did Su Yun return safe and sound, he even obtained the power of the celestial pool. Things were not as simple as they seemed. Ao Wushuang was shocked to find out that after Su Yun and Shangguan Meiyang returned, no one came to Peerless sect to cause trouble, not even the people from the Immortal Court. What did this mean? This could only mean one thing. No one knew that Su Yun had obtained the celestial pool water. Or rather, the people who knew no longer existed. No matter which possibility it was hard for him to believe. He even suspected that Su Yun had really obtained the celestial pool water, but looking at the change in Su Yun and Shangguan Meiyang, he could not find any other better explanation. Towards Ao Wushuang's actions, Su Yun did not feel too disgusted, and did not resist. After thinking for a while, he did not feel that it was inappropriate, and accepted it generously. Since that's the case, then I will thank sect leader Ao first. He did not want to be pretentious. Furthermore, some of these things were still useful to him. I might not need them all, so there's no need to thank me. All right, sect leader Ao, I won't say any more polite words. Even if I leave this time, it's not that I won't come back to Peerless sect in the future. If there's a chance in the future, I will pay a visit again. I only hope that sect leader Ao will not reject me. Su Yun cupped his fists and said, How would I dare? The Peerless sect's door will always be open for you, Su Yun. Ao Wushuang said seriously. Although he was being polite, he was neither servile nor overbearing. Su Yun nodded. He did not stay for long, and immediately walked out. Su Yun, I'll send you off. Wait! Su Yun called out, and his figure suddenly disappeared. In the air, there was not even a trace of him left. Ao Wushuang was startled. When he reacted, there was no longer any trace of Su Yun in the entire hall, and immediately sighed. The current Su Yun was indeed much stronger than him. After leaving the main hall, Su Yun headed straight for the main entrance of the Peerless sect. It would take some time to get to the gate of the immortal realm from here. He had already ordered the people arranged by the Round Demon to report to him at the gate of the immortal realm. If he rushed over now, it should be about time. As he thought about it, he walked out. However, just as he left the Peerless sect, a few figures followed closely behind and flew out of the Peerless sect with him. Su Yun did not care. After all, these few auras were too weak, and the disciples of the Peerless sect went in and out, so he did not deliberately care. However, he did not know that the few people who followed him out were Liang Haotian and the others. Stinking brat, this time, I'll let you know who's in charge here. Liang Haotian stared at Su Yun, who was flying in the distance, and the corner of his mouth raised into a cold smile. Hiss! Su Yun, who was flying in front, suddenly trembled. His body felt cold. He seemed to have felt something, and looked back, only to see a few people following behind. It was Liang Haotian and the others. Seeing that, Su Yun frowned, but just as he was looking at Liang Haotian, a sound of something tearing through the air suddenly came out. Shwa! The terrifying sound pierced his eardrums, followed by a tremor in the air, as if something was cutting towards him. The speed was ridiculously fast. Ordinary immortals could not see it clearly. Su Yun's nerves tensed up, and he looked towards the source of the sound. Blade. A sharp blade. Chapter 1142. It was the first time Su Yun had seen such a fast blade. Fortunately, he had already obtained the transformation of the immortal pool, and his cultivation had increased greatly, allowing him to clearly see the trajectory of the blade. If he still had his previous strength, he would have suffered a loss. Su Yun stared at the incoming blade. His eyes and hands were quick. He quickly raised his right hand, and with a speed that was difficult for others to match, when his palm approached the blade, he immediately extended 2 fingers, and fiercely flicked at the blade. Wung wung wung, the blade was instantly deflected. The immortal chi on the blade had no effect on Su Yun's fingers, and the moment it got close, it disappeared without a trace. The lightning-fast blade directly brushed past Su Yun's body. A gust of wind swept up, and the clouds in the surroundings were blown away. Su Yun turned around and looked at the direction the blade flew in. The blade did not hit Su Yun, and flew forward for 1,000 meters before slowing down. Only then did Su Yun see clearly that there was a person behind the blade, and this person was extremely big, and was actually tall and sturdy. His attack did not hit, but he was not in a hurry to attack. Instead, he turned his head and stared at Su Yun with a serious expression. He looked at the blade in his hand, then looked at Su Yun, and after a long while, he finally said something. "You're very strong. Since you know I'm strong, you still dare to cause trouble for me?" Su Yun smiled, seeing Liang Haotian and the rest rushing over. He immediately understood that this person was Liang Haotian's man. Su Yun. Let's see who else can help you this time. Liang Haotian looked at Su Yun coldly, the corner of his mouth raised into a pleased smile. Help? I didn't plan to let anyone help me at all. Furthermore, I don't need anyone to help me. Liang Haotian, if it's just you, I can still handle it. Su Yun said. What big words you have there. Liang Haotian sneered again and again, then said, I'll let you be like this, you'll know my methods later. With that, Liang Haotian raised his hand, pointed at Su Yun, and said to the big-sized man with the blade, Quick Blade Immortal, go, chop off both of his hands for me. The Quick Blade Immortal hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still made his move. The saber in his hand suddenly moved, like rain falling on a leaf. Then, he and his saber disappeared in an instant. So fast. Liang Haotian was extremely pleased with himself. With such speed, he was simply unable to see where the swift saber immortal was. Perhaps even Ao Wushuang would not be a match for such a powerful immortal. Yet, such a powerful existence was actually listening to him. How could he not be pleased with himself? However, in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, Su Yun suddenly disappeared. Seeing that, Liang Haotian was startled. He anxiously looked left and right, even the people behind him anxiously looked around, but they still could not find Su Yun. Not only the silhouette, but even the aura smell could not be detected. There was no movement at all, and it was so strange that it was suffocating. Is it gone? Did he use some immortal art? What kind of immortal technique could cause this? Perhaps it's as fast as the swift saber immortal. Absolutely not. Don't worry, young master. That bastard is definitely afraid of Swift Saber Immortal and has used some sort of technique to hide himself. He'll definitely reveal himself soon, someone said. When Liang Haotian heard that, he felt that it made sense. He nodded, crossed his arms, and watched quietly. However, not long after crash, a burst of chi suddenly erupted in the sky. All the immortals immediately activated their immortal chi to block the chi that was mixed with dense destructive power, and when the chi gradually weakened, they saw that the swift saber immortal and Su Yun who had disappeared earlier had reappeared, but the two of them had already separated. Su Yun quietly stood in the sky. His face under the pitch-black cloak was extremely calm. His entire body was not injured at all, and his hands were also empty. But the swift saber immortal was different. He was gasping for breath as he flew backwards, The hand that was holding onto the blade was trembling nonstop. The veins on the hand were popping out, but the hand seemed to be extremely weak, as though it could let go of the blade at any time, especially the chi around his body. It was extremely chaotic. Seeing the Swift Saber Immortal in such a state, everyone was startled. "Swift Saber Immortal, what's going on with you? Why haven't you chopped off that guy's hands? Did you not hear my orders clearly?" Liang Haotian felt that he had lost a lot of face. He did not know what had happened, and immediately shouted, "Are you not in a good state today? Quickly get rid of that bastard for me." "Young master." The Swift Saber Immortal seemed to be enduring. He clenched his teeth and said, "Young master, please forgive this subordinate for being useless. This subordinate is not this person's match." "What?" Liang Haotian turned pale with fright. He did not dare believe what he had just heard. He was startled. He looked at the Swift Saber Immortal in shock, only to see that the Swift Saber Immortal looked as though he could not hold on anymore. How could he still have the spirit he had before? How could this be? How many rounds did he fight with this guy? The Swift Saber Immortal could not hold on anymore? "You said that you are not this guy's match? How is that possible? Are you purposely throwing the match?" Liang Haotian could not think of a reason, because he did not believe in the guy's strength. Throwing the match. Without waiting for the Swift Saber Immortal to speak, Su Yun laughed. He raised his head and stared at Liang Haotian, and said indifferently, "There shouldn't be a need. I don't know this guy. Why should I throw the match?" With that, his arm suddenly trembled. His right hand took out a gigantic sword sheath out of nowhere and hung it on his back. Following that, his palm touched the sword sheath, and a snow-white sharp sword appeared in his palm. Liang Haotian's mind tensed up. His heart suddenly started to beat frantically. For some reason, when the guy took out the sword, he felt as though his life was in the hands of the other party. The guy holding the sword and not holding the sword were two completely different things. "I will let you see whether this so-called Swift Saber Immortal is throwing the match or not." With that said, his body suddenly disappeared. "Ah!" Liang Haotian immediately screamed. He looked around in fear. His eyes filled with fear. This time, he was starting to believe the Swift Saber Immortal's words. Maybe this guy was not hiding at all, but was the same as the Swift Saber Immortal, raising his speed to the limit, to the point that the naked eye could not keep up. Liang Haotian believed that he had the cultivation of a spirit profound immortal, although he relied on external objects to forcefully raise his cultivation. Strictly speaking, he was only a false immortal, but his naked eye was not something a mortal could compare to. However, he was still unable to catch Su Yun's figure, and could not even find a trace of his chi. Suddenly, a sound of something tearing through the air came out. Liang Haotian's entire body twitched. He immediately looked towards the source of the sound. The sound came from behind him. He suddenly turned around, but the moment he turned, everything in front of him immediately shocked him. Behind him, his subordinates were all standing tall in the air. Their heads had all disappeared, and blood spurted out from their severed necks like fountains. Fresh blood shot up into the sky, and the scene was extremely bizarre. Liang Haotian's eyes widened. His face instantly became deathly pale, without any trace of blood. His body also started to tremble uncontrollably. Beads of perspiration flowed down his forehead, and directly flowed down. On the other side, the Swift Saber Immortal's eyes were also tightly focused. His heart was incomparably heavy. The hand that was holding onto the blade could not help but tremble violently. What a fast speed, this guy! Just what cultivation does he have? His speed is actually more than twice as fast as mine, and from the looks of it, it seems like he has not used his full strength yet. The Swift Saber Immortal secretly clenched his teeth. His heart was filled with unwillingness. For the sake of cultivation speed, he had suffered countless hardships, and now that he had obtained the name of the Swift Saber Immortal, he believed that no one in the entire immortal world was his match in terms of speed. But after seeing Su Yun today, he realized that he was simply a frog at the bottom of a well. Blood continued to spurt out. Liang Haotian's body was still trembling, but at this time, a snow-white sword quietly extended out from behind his head, and directly pressed against his neck. Following that, a voice came out. "Is there a reply?" It was Su Yun's voice. Liang Haotian was so scared that he almost fell from the sky. With a sullen face, he immediately shouted, "I believe! I believe! Don't kill me! I beg you, don't kill me!" "How can that be?" Su Yun's face turned cold, his killing intent instantly erupted, and his voice became extremely cold. "I hate threats the most. Didn't you threaten me before? I don't like trouble. It's better to eliminate the threat first." With that, Su Yun was about to take action. Seeing that, the swift saber immortal immediately became anxious. He clenched his teeth, and still rushed forward. But his speed could not keep up with Su Yun's. Even if he rushed forward, he would definitely not be able to stop Su Yun. "Stop!" Just then, an urgent shout came from afar. Su Yun frowned, he raised his head and looked over, only to see a large group of immortals flying over from afar, with Ao Wushuang in the lead. When Liang Haotian saw the people, it was as if he had seen his life-saving straw, and anxiously shouted, "Uncle Ao! Uncle Ao! Save me! Save my Uncle Ao!" "Ao Wushuang?" Su Yun bellowed. "Even if you're here, it's impossible. Since Liang Haotian plans to kill me, then he is my mortal enemy, and against my mortal enemy, I will definitely not be lenient." Sect leader Ao, "Don't blame Su Yun for not giving you face today. It is Liang Haotian who did not give you face first." With that said, Su Yun immediately pushed his speed to the limit. The moment the swift saber immortal got close, he was kicked flying by Su Yun. Following that, the snow-white lotus star sword swung out, the sword tipped directly chopping towards Liang Haotian's head. "Su Yun! Quickly stop! Quickly stop!" Ao Wushuang shouted anxiously. But it had no effect. An ear-piercing sound rang out. Chapter 1143. A head was thrown into the air, blood spurting out like a fountain. Ao Wushuang, who was flying over from afar, was stunned. After a long while, he sighed. "Sect Master Ao, don't say that I didn't give you face. Today, I'll only destroy his physical body and cripple his cultivation. I won't harm his soul. If he still doesn't forget about this matter in the future and takes it to heart, then next time, I won't destroy his physical body," Su Yun said in a low voice. With a turn of his body, he leaped up and disappeared into the distance. Ao Wushuang wanted to say something, but seeing that Su Yun had left, he let it go. The people of Peerless Sect stared at the corpse that fell from the sky, as if they could not react. "Sect leader, how are we going to explain this to the Immortal Court?" A Peerless Sect disciple said with a trembling voice. That was a rank 3 mystical envoy, someone that the Peerless Sect could not afford to offend. "Explain? How are we going to explain?" Ao Wushuang sighed and said faintly, "Let's keep the corpse and the soul first. Let's resurrect Liang Haotian first. After he's resurrected, I'll personally make a trip to the Immortal Court and ask for forgiveness from his father. Our Peerless Sect is not worthy of such an existence. The sooner we get rid of this relationship, the better he will be." All the disciples looked at each other, and in the end, no one said anything. "Let's go back." "Yes, Sect leader." After leaving the Peerless Sect, Su Yun immediately headed towards the gate of the Immortal Realm. Although he had killed Liang Haotian, he had only destroyed his physical body and not his soul. This was not considered extreme. If the Third Order envoy had some understanding, he would definitely not pursue the matter. After all, Su Yun's display of power was too shocking. If he was really from the Immortal Court, how would he dare to be so meddlesome? Originally, Su Yun had planned to kill him to prevent future troubles. But after considering Ao Wushuang's situation, he was still soft-hearted. Ao Wushuang had sacrificed too much for Qing Air in the past. Su Yun still felt that he owed him. His speed was extremely fast. It took him less than 2 days to reach the gate of the immortal realm. Very quickly, whoosh! The strong wind rippled beside his ears, and he saw a vast and boundless land of clouds in the distance. This land of clouds was extremely thick and huge, as if there was no end to it. A person flying on it was like a grain of rice in the sea. After advancing for about half a day, huge and dazzling gates slowly appeared on the horizon. These gates were shining brightly and radiated light in all directions. The nearby white clouds were dyed gold by them. Seeing that, Su Yun immediately stopped, landed on the cloud, and looked over. At the entrance to the celestial realm, there were a large number of celestials flying around. Some of the doors were open, and many people dressed in different attire would come out. However, when these people came out of the celestial realm gate, they didn't dare to fly around randomly. Instead, they all lined up and stood to the side, waiting to be inspected. That was because there were even more people from the immortal court standing guard beside the gate of the realm of immortals. Almost every gate of the immortal realm was guarded by over 100 armored and powerful immortal court people. Anyone who entered or exited the gate of the immortal realm had to go through identity verification, and only those who passed the test could successfully enter or exit the gate of the immortal realm. After the previous upheaval, the immortal court placed great importance on the gate of the immortal realm, and had also sent out a large number of troops to guard this place. Not only that, the immortal court had also recruited a portion of volunteer soldiers from nearly 100 immortal sects. These volunteer soldiers came from these 100 or so immortal sects, and were all elite. However, they had to listen to the orders of the immortal court and guard this place. With such a strong defense, even if the chaos in the immortal world were to repeat itself, the gate of the immortal realm would not be in a situation where it would be difficult to defend. Su Yun paused for a moment, and immediately contacted the round demon. Not long after, a middle-aged man dressed in a plain blue robe flew over. The man looked around, as if he was looking for something. When he saw Su Yun, he quietly sized him up, and after confirming it again and again, he went forward. "Are you from the Martial Lion sect?" he asked very carefully and very slowly. At the same time, he was staring straight at Su Yun. "No. I am from the Immortal Seeking sect," Su Yun said straightforwardly. Hearing that, the man was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly cupped his fists. "This subordinate greets master." Su Yun immediately helped the man up and said solemnly, "There are too many people here, don't be like this." "Yes." The man nodded and stood up straight. Su Yun looked around and realized that no one was paying attention to them. She then asked softly, "Are you the informant sent by the round demon?" "Yes, master, this subordinate is following Master Zi Jin's orders. Not long ago, Master Yuan Demon sent a message saying that master has arrived and asked this subordinate to come and receive you." The middle-aged man said respectfully, "What about the words that the round demon asked you to bring?" "Oh, reporting to master, Master Yuan Demon has sent a message saying that the Sword Ancestor's current location should be at the peak of the Martial God Realm. If master wants to go look for the Sword Ancestor, I'm afraid you won't be able to reach it through this ordinary gate of the Immortal Realm." "What do you mean?" Su Yun frowned. "What is this peak of the Martial God Realm?" The peak of the Martial God Realm is a special realm that belongs to the ultimate martial world, but is different from the ultimate martial world. It is located at the southernmost tip of the ultimate martial world, and because the sea that is connected to the ultimate martial world has been distorted by a mysterious power, even immortals cannot reach the peak of the martial God Realm through that sea, but they can enter from other inheritance gates, and in this gate of the immortal realm, there is only one door that can enter the peak of the martial God Realm, and that is the Qian Gate on the far left. If master wants to go to the peak of the martial God Realm to find the Sword Ancestor, this subordinate suggests that master go through the Qian Gate. The man said, "Alright, let's go through the Qian Gate." This subordinate will immediately arrange for master to leave the immortal realm. The man said, then took out a command medallion and muttered a few words, then said to Su Yun, "Master, this way please." "Yes." Su Yun followed the man towards the Qian gate. On the way, Su Yun could not help but ask, "From the looks of it, you seem to know quite a bit about the peak of the martial god realm?" Reporting to Master, this subordinate was also an immortal who rose up from the ultimate martial world. "I have been to the peak of the martial god realm once." "What kind of place is it?" "Hot. 9 out of 10 deaths." "Very dangerous?" "Yes, and there is a sect that even immortals cannot control. This sect is almost the overlord of the peak of the martial god realm. They control all the resources in the peak of the martial god realm. The peak of the martial god realm is rich in resources, and there are a lot of spirit mines that contain energy. It is a treasure land that many people covet, even immortals yearn for day and night, but this sect is especially strong, adding to the fact that they have been staying at the peak of the martial god realm for many years. The harsh conditions of this place are disadvantageous to outsiders, but extremely advantageous to them. Relying on the various factors of the peak of the martial god realm, they actually repelled a group of attacks from the Jingyu Imperial Palace 2,000 years ago, and successfully ruled over the peak of the martial god realm. After that, a portion of the immortals entered, but they only entered and did not leave. People guessed that they were most likely killed by that sect, and thus, this place became a forbidden area for many immortals. "I never thought that there would be such a place in the ultimate martial world." Su Yun sighed. In the boundless world, there were all sorts of strange things. "In short, Master, be careful. Many of the people in that sect also possess the strength of immortals. They are extremely repulsive towards outsiders. If Master were to meet people from that sect, you must be careful." The middle-aged man said, and sent Su Yun to the front of the Qian gate. There were also over 100 people from the immortal court standing here. In front of the Qian gate there was a short line with only a dozen or so people. Compared to the other gates, which had more than 100 people, it was already considered quite good. This guy seemed to have already arranged everything. When it was Su Yun's turn to be inspected, the person only searched Su Yun's body symbolically. He did not ask for his name, nor did he inspect the magic treasure, and directly let him go. "Let's go. Hurry up," the immortal court person in charge of the search urged. Su Yun did not waste any time, and directly jumped into the Qian gate. Voila! A burst of light burst forth from within the huge gate, and Su Yun's entire body disappeared within the light. Seeing that, the middle-aged man immediately retreated, intending to leave. Bang! Just as he turned and was about to leave, an old man dressed in a white robe suddenly walked over. The old man lowered his head and looked at the ground, as if he did not see him. Their shoulders collided fiercely. The old man swayed and almost fell, but the middle-aged man was fine. He took 2 steps back and frowned as he glanced at the old man. Seeing that the old man was fine, he did not say anything, and quickened his pace to leave. The old man raised his head. Under his white hair, there was actually a pair of silver-white eyes. He looked at the middle-aged man who left, and then glanced at the door. His silver-white eyes flickered with a strange gray light. He walked towards the Qian gate. When the immortal court people stationed at the Qian gate saw him, they hurriedly cupped their fists and bowed. "Master, Master, you're here." "Yes." The old man nodded, but extended his hand, and caressed the door frame of the Qian gate. "This world will never be peaceful." Voila! The sound of something tearing through the air rang out. Su Yun opened his eyes, and discovered that he was no longer above the vast clouds of the immortal world. The current him was rapidly descending. Below him was an incomparably pitch-black land. The sky was dusky and the air was filled with dust. He looked around and discovered that on this black land there were more than 10 huge volcanoes. Each of the volcanoes was emitting thick smoke, as if they would erupt at any time. As he continued to descend, the surrounding temperature became higher and higher. When he landed on the ground with a boom, Su Yun was surprised to discover that the surrounding temperature had already exceeded 1,000 degrees. Although he did not feel any discomfort, this kind of place was truly amazing. He looked around and couldn't help but frown. Crap, the round demon only told me that Sword Ancestor was active at the Martial God Peak, but he didn't tell me the exact location. How big is the Martial God Peak? Where should I start looking? Chapter 1144. Father, why did you summon me in such a hurry? What's the matter? Inside the Peerless sect, Shangguan Mei Yang followed a Peerless sect disciple in front of her and hurriedly walked forward. Her face was filled with doubt. Miss, I don't know either. Maybe the sect leader has something important to tell you. The disciple in front of her turned around and smiled bitterly. Shangguan Mei Yang frowned and did not say anything else. With a face full of thoughts, she walked to the main hall. At this moment, the main hall's door was already closed. At the door stood two of Ao Wushuang's trusted aides, guarding the door. Seeing the two of them, Shangguan Mei Yang was even more astonished, because the ones who guarded this place in the past were not these two fellows. Furthermore, why was the hall that was used to receive and discuss matters closed? Miss, please go in. The sect leader is inside, I won't go in. The disciple smiled, then cupped his fists towards the door and shouted, reporting to the sect leader, Miss has arrived. Got it. You can leave first. A voice came from inside. Yes, sect leader. The disciple cupped his fists again, then hurriedly retreated. Shangguan Mei Yang looked inside suspiciously, then looked at the disciple. In the end, she still carried a perturbed heart and walked towards the main hall. Creak. The door was pushed open. There were not many people sitting in the main hall. There were only two. One was Ao Wushuang and the other was Shangguan Qingqing. Father? Mother? Shangguan Mei Yang was startled. She did not understand what was going on. There was a purple light flashing around the main hall. Ao Wushuang seemed to have activated a barrier and sealed the connection between this place and the outside world. Seeing this, Shangguan Mei Yang became even more confused. Father, mother, what is going on? What do you want to do? Yang don't be nervous. I called you here today not for anything else but to ask you something. Ao Wushuang said indifferently. Father, what do you want to ask Yang? Shangguan Mei Yang said. Ao Wushuang was silent for a moment, as if he was thinking about something. Shangguan Qingqing sat quietly on the chair and did not say a word. After an unknown period of time, Yang what's your current cultivation? My cultivation? I've already peeked into the profound spirit god realm. About to step into the profound spirit god realm? Ao Wushuang gasped. This is all thanks to the celestial pool's water. If not for the celestial pool's water, how could I have such strength? Shangguan Mei Yang laughed and said. Yeah, the water of the celestial pond is miraculous indeed. Otherwise, it wouldn't have caused countless people from the celestial world to fight for it. Ao Wushuang sighed and said slowly, in the past, the appearance of the immortal pond divine miracle was bound to cause a storm of blood. Even with the intervention of the immortal court, the chaos couldn't be avoided. But this time, the immortal pond divine miracle didn't cause too much turmoil, except, at this point, Ao Wushuang paused. Shangguan Mei Yang looked at Ao Wushuang with a solemn expression. Ao Wushuang looked at his daughter and continued, only the immortal court suffered a great loss this time. It is said that the immortal court lost a large number of rank 5 envoys, a few rank 4 envoys and a rank 3 envoy. The main forces of the immortal court were also severely weakened. These people died in the operation of the immortal pool, right beside the immortal pool. Do you know about this? Ao Wushuang looked at his daughter seriously, and his last question was especially serious. When Shangguan Mei Yang heard this, she immediately understood why Ao Wushuang asked her to come. She thought for a while and said in a low voice, Father, it's really hard for me to tell you about this matter. After all, it's related to the Immortal Court. Once it's leaked, everyone related to it will be hunted down by the Immortal Court or even killed. So, I can't tell you. I understand that you're doing this for Su Yun's sake. But I just want to ask, is the death of these people related to Su Yun? Ao Wushuang said in a low voice. Shangguan Meiyang looked down for a long time and said softly, yes. Such a simple word fell into Ao Wushuang's ears, but it gave him a great shock. He widened his eyes and looked at his daughter blankly, unable to say a word. Not long ago, he received news about the Immortal Pool. This news had spread like wildfire, and had already spread throughout the immortal world, causing a huge uproar in the immortal world. The Immortal Court had suffered heavy losses this time, and its status had also been shaken. People were very curious about who did this to the Immortal Court. After all, the Immortal Court had not announced the murderer, which meant that even they themselves did not know. What kind of method was this? Father, please don't tell others. Don't worry, why would I tell others? After all, you're also involved in this matter. Once it's leaked, my peerless sect will not be able to escape responsibility. Ao Wushuang said in a low voice, but I never thought that Su Yun would actually cause such a huge ruckus. Although he did it cleanly, it's better to be safe than sorry. Yang for the time being, stay in peerless sect and don't go anywhere. Wait for this matter to settle down first. Yes, father. Outside the Immortal Seeking sect, a group of people dressed in brownish-yellow embroidered robes flew over from afar. There were a total of 12 people in this group. As soon as they landed, they flashed the tokens on their waists. The Immortal Court is here to handle matters. Quickly summon your sect leader, we have important matters to attend to. The leader did not have the slightest bit of politeness, and directly shouted at the 2 disciples who were on duty at the gate. The 2 disciples were still stunned, probably unable to react. They watched as the group of people directly walked in, as if they were too lazy to wait outside. How overbearing! Hey, stop! All of you, stop! The 2 disciples hurriedly rushed over, but they could not stop these powerful Immortal Court people at all. Seeing that the situation was not good, one of them immediately shouted, and at the same time sounded the alarm. In an instant, a large number of immortals rushed out of the Immortal Seeking sect, and directly surrounded the group of Immortal Court people. There were 3 layers of people inside and 3 layers outside, and not a single drop of water could escape. Xiang Yang rushed over immediately, and upon seeing this group of people, he immediately shouted, "Who are you people? How dare you behave atrociously in the Immortal Seeking sect? Although the Immortal Seeking sect is not big, we will not let anyone bully us. Men, take them down." Yes. Wait, we are from the Immortal Court, and this time we came to the Immortal Seeking sect with important matters. Who are you? The leader took out another token and said, "Me?" Xiang Yang snorted and said, "I am the vice sect leader of the Immortal Seeking sect, Xiang Yang." "You are Xiang Yang?" The few people were surprised. "May I know where the sect leader is?" "The sect leader is out and has not returned yet." "You say you are from the Immortal Court?" "Humph, the token looks real, but your behavior is too rude. Since when can the people of the Immortal Court ignore the rules and laws of the Immortal Court and trespass into the land of other sects?" Xiang Yang said coldly. "Time is of the essence. We have been authorized by the Immortal Court to enter any sect at will. The laws of the immortal world are made by everyone, and the Immortal Court has no right to change them. This is not a change, just a temporary decision," the man said indifferently. Hearing this, Xiang Yang was so angry that his face turned red. "Well, Vice Sect Leader Xiang Yang, since the sect leader is not here, it is the same to ask you. I hope you can actively cooperate with us, and don't cause us trouble. In this way, it will be good for the Immortal Court, and also for the Immortal Seeking sect." The man seemed to ignore Xiang Yang's feelings, holding a roll of paper in his hand. He opened it, looked at the paper, and began to speak. I would like to ask sect leader Xiang Yang, has anyone else entered your sect recently? Although our sect has not recruited disciples during this period, the sect has not been closed. Friends from all over the world come here, and we will certainly welcome them. What do you mean? Perhaps I didn't express myself clearly enough. That person straightened up the paper and looked at the picture of a man drawn on the paper. The man wore a pitch-black cloak, and his face could not be seen clearly. He held a snow-white sword in his hand, and his entire body was filled with devil chi. Although it was drawn on a roll of paper, because it was condensed from immortal chi, it appeared lifelike, as if it was a real person. Xiang Yang's heart skipped a beat, and his breathing became tight. Although it was only a glance, he recognized that this person was Su Yun. Calm down. He had to be calm. Xiang Yang anxiously warned himself in his heart. These were all spies sent by the Immortal Court, so he couldn't expose himself in front of them. Xiang Yang pretended to be very careful as he carefully examined the scroll of paper. Then, he shook his head and said indifferently, "Who is this person? I've never seen him before." He is a heaven-rank wanted criminal of the Immortal Court, and has already been placed at the top of the blacklist. Now, the Immortal Court will split a third of its power to investigate this person. As long as this person is not brought to justice, the Immortal Court's focus will never shift. Who is he? I don't know. What's his name? Which sect is he from? I don't know either. You don't know anything about him. Why did you come to my immortal seeking sect to investigate? Xiang Yang was puzzled. The man holding the scroll of paper narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "Because our Immortal Court's envoy calculated that this person is most active in this area, and this area is the territory of your immortal seeking sect." What? He stared at the portrait and asked carefully, "This person, what did he do?" "This is confidential. Vice Sect Leader Xiang Yang, from today onwards, the Immortal Court will place people here. From today onwards, no one from the Immortal Seeking Sect will be allowed to leave the Immortal Seeking Sect. We will have special people to investigate. The investigation will not take too long, about a day. After a day, if there is no such person in the Immortal Seeking Sect, we will clear the Immortal Seeking Sect's name. Please cooperate with us, Sect Leader Xiang Yang," the man said indifferently. But as soon as he said that, Xiang Yang's heart almost jumped out of his throat. Investigation? Half of the people in the Immortal Seeking Sect were devil cultivators. Chapter 1145. Scorched Earth. Scorched earth was everywhere, and the pitch-black ground was cracked open. The cracks were like abysses, like the huge mouths of ferocious beasts. It was pitch black, and other than the black smoke that floated out, there was nothing else. Su Yun stared at his surroundings. He had already walked for half a day, although he did not know how big the Martial God Peak was, but he could roughly guess that it shouldn't be too big. Suddenly, Su Yun stopped in his tracks. He looked forward, and saw a pitch-black shadow standing in the distant horizon. The shadow was like a heavenly pillar, connecting the heavens and the earth. Previously, he was far away and there was a mountain in the way, so he did not see it. Now that he had climbed over the mountain, it immediately appeared in his line of sight. Su Yun was curious. He immediately increased his speed and walked towards the pillar. However, just as he was about to reach the pillar, Su Yun finally saw the people inside the Martial God Peak. It turned out that around the pillar, there were a large number of buildings. These buildings were all pitch black, and they surrounded the gigantic pillar, standing one by one. Looking at the material of these buildings, they seemed to be built from the scorched earth on the ground. Around every building, there were many people wearing dark red robes walking around. Just as Su Yun was about to get closer, he saw that there was a gigantic stone door at the front of the building, and beside the stone door stood a large stone tablet. Martial God Sect. Su Yun looked at the 3 big words on the stone tablet, and could not help but read them out loud. Martial God sect? Could it be the sect that ruled the peak of the martial god realm? Was it these people? He looked at the people below him and realized that many of them only had the cultivation of spirit sage, and had not even reached the spirit profound immortal. If it was just these people, it would be impossible for them to repel the people from the Feather Emperor Palace. Who is it? Just then, an explosive shout came out from the building, causing the people inside to be startled. They all looked out, and at the same time, a figure rushed out, flying straight towards Su Yun. Su Yun looked over, only to see a man with red skin and a bare upper body flying out. The man's face was full of flesh, the flesh on his body swelled like a mountain. His head was bare, there was a Buddha seal on top of his head. He looked like a monk, but his eyes were filled with killing intent. He did not look like one. Su Yun did not intentionally hide his qi. With his cultivation, even if he did not intentionally hide his qi, the amount of qi that leaked out from his body was very little. However, he did not expect that someone would detect it. This was beyond his expectations. Su Yun stared at the monk whose entire body was red, sizing him up, feeling somewhat astonished. Third stage Spirit Profound Immortal? Only the strength of a third stage Spirit Profound Immortal? How did you discover my existence? Su Yun could not understand. Could it be that this guy has some kind of unique magic treasure on him? Or could it be that everyone in the martial god sect had such a special ability? Interesting. It seemed that the people from the martial god sect were not simple. Your aura doesn't belong to the martial god sect. Who are you? What are you doing here? The monk shouted angrily at Su Yun. His voice was very loud and filled with anger, as though Su Yun had angered him. My name is Su Yun, and I am naturally not from the martial god sect. I came from the outside world, and came to the peak of the martial god sect to find someone. I wonder who you are? Su Yun asked indifferently. You said you're from the outside world? When the monk heard that, he was immediately enraged, and the killing intent in his eyes was almost unconcealed. He did not care if Su Yun would explain or not, and directly rushed forward, both of his hands forming fists, and punched towards Su Yun. The two fists were actually ignited with scarlet-red flames. The temperature was extremely high, and like two fireballs, they struck towards Su Yun. Su Yun frowned, his face darkening. The fist came flying over, but he did not dodge, and just stood there, bang, bang. Two muffled sounds came out. The two fists that were like fireballs smashed onto Su Yun's chest in the air, and then suddenly stopped. The moment the flames on the fists touched Su Yun, they immediately spread throughout his body, but not long after, they disappeared without a trace. The monk was startled. He raised his head to look at Su Yun, only to discover that he was completely unharmed. There was not a single wound on his body. What? The monk's expression changed drastically. Could it be that his attack was completely ignored by this guy? He quickly retracted his fist and planned to retreat, but just as he was about to leave, a palm instantly extended out, directly forming a claw and grabbing his neck. The attack was extremely fast, so fast that no one had any time to react, let alone defend. The monk's neck was grabbed and he was immediately lifted up. A mysterious power surged out from the palm and seeped into his skin, drilling into the various great immortal meridians in his body, directly sealing all the immortal qi in his body. The monk immediately struggled, but he discovered that no matter how much strength he used, he was unable to break free from the grip of the big hand. He opened his eyes wide and looked at Su Yun, only to discover that the man was already expressionless, and in his eyes, the cold killing intent became even stronger. Stop! Quickly release the Lord Protector. Capture him! Angry roars erupted. All of the people from the martial god sect had a bad temper, and with this move, their killing intent soared. All of them raised their blades and swords, and fiercely smashed towards Su Yun. What was surprising was that as they brandished their blades and swords, they released scorching flames. The aura used by the people from the martial god sect seemed to be related to fire. Su Yun frowned, his face suddenly darkened, and his voice became ice-cold. Is this the way the martial god sect welcomes guests? Good. Alright. As the sound of his voice faded, his arm trembled, and a snow-white sword instantly appeared in his palm. He shook the snow-white sword, and the monk who was pinching his left hand immediately exploded. The corpse pieces and blood splattered in all directions, and the people who rushed over were no exception. Under the existence of Su Yun's spirit god strength, any spirit immortal or spirit sage could only be slaughtered. A wave of snow-white sword images flashed past, and the people from the martial god sect were all cut into pieces. A large amount of flesh and blood turned into rain and fell down. Su Yun held onto his sword, his eyes bloodshot and his expression ice-cold. His massacre had finally intimidated the furious people from the martial god sect. Their faces were pale white, unwillingly and fearfully looking at Su Yun, who was dyed red with blood in the air. They only surrounded him and did not attack. I came here just to look for someone. I hope you will cooperate with me. I don't want to kill. Su Yun said indifferently. What a good you don't want to kill. You trespassed on the territory of my martial god sect and slaughtered my people. Now you say such words. What's wrong? Do you think that there is no one in my martial god sect? Or could it be that you simply look down on my martial god sect? Just then, a low and deep voice floated over from afar, and in the blink of an eye, a series of shadows shot out from within the martial god sect. These shadows numbered in the tens of thousands, flying out from all directions of the martial god sect, and in the end, they all gathered in front of Su Yun, transforming into a man dressed in a black robe holding onto a long blade. The man was extremely sturdy, with a long crown on his head, his beard straight, and his entire body was filled with strength. Su Yun casually swept a glance at the man, and asked indifferently, Are you the sect leader of the martial god sect? I am the second clan elder of the martial god sect, Tai Miao. Let your sect leader come out. You are not my match. What big words you have there. Tai Miao was not angry but instead chuckled. However, my martial god sect has stood at the peak of the martial god realm for so many years. What kind of people have I not seen before? Even if it's all kinds of immortals, we have seen them frequently, but this is the first time I have seen someone as arrogant and conceited as you. We haven't even fought yet. How do you know that I'm not your match? After Tai Miao finished speaking, he raised the long blade in his hand slightly. But just at this moment, an ice-cold killing intent enveloped his body, causing Tai Miao's entire body to tremble. He cursed inwardly and anxiously retreated. But before he could even move, a hand instantly pierced through his chest, grabbing his flesh and pulling him over. Tai Miao spat out a mouthful of blood. His originally spirited appearance immediately became dispirited and listless. That hand was Su Yun's, and Su Yun grabbed him, and the two of them looked at each other face to face. He stared coldly, and Tai Miao wanted to struggle, but he discovered that all of the immortal qi in his body had disappeared, as though it had been sucked dry by the hand that had pierced through his chest. He was instantly crippled by his opponent. Tai Miao was dumbstruck, thinking about such a terrifying thing. He seemed to have forgotten about his own pain. How could this be? How could this be? How do you think we still need to fight? Su Yun stared at Tai Miao and said coldly. He could see the fear in Tai Miao's eyes. He was afraid, and he was trembling with fear. I will only give you one chance, and I will also give you people from the martial god sect a chance, only one. You, quickly go and inform your martial god sect's sect leader, tell him to come and see me, or else don't blame me for taking action myself to find him. With that said, Su Yun casually waved his hand and threw Tai Miao out. Tai Miao fell to the ground, spitting out blood again. Almost no one from the martial god sect dared to step forward. Even Lord Tai Miao was crippled in one move, and was unable to retaliate at all, let alone them. Who was this guy? Which realm did he come from? Tai Miao did not dare disobey Su Yun. He was thrown to the ground. He stood up with difficulty, and then slowly left. It seemed like he was planning to inform the sect leader. However, not long after Tai Miao left, the sky suddenly turned red, the surrounding temperature suddenly rose, the earth shook, the ground split open, and a large amount of magma spewed out from the cracks. Seeing this scene, all the disciples of the martial god sect immediately knelt on the ground and shouted loudly, "Welcome, sect leader." Chapter 1146. The sect leader of the martial god sect is here? Su Yun stared at the gigantic black pillar. He could feel that there was some kind of power overflowing from the black pillar. This power was many times stronger than the disciples of the martial god sect, and it was extremely tyrannical. It was likely that the person who came was an extremely ferocious existence. I never thought that there would be someone who would dare to behave atrociously in my martial god sect. I really want to see who has the guts to do so, A burst of eerie laughter rang out. This voice sounded abnormally deep and oppressive, giving off an incomparably heavy feeling. It was as if something was pressing down on his shoulders, making him unable to breathe. Su Yun held onto the lotus star sword and stared at the black pillar in the distance. With a sound, a thick ball of flame shot out from behind the black pillar. The flame was not big, but its temperature was extremely high. It was like a meteor, dragging a long tail as it crazily spat out, and with every inch it got closer, the temperature in the air would increase by 1,000 degrees. When it got close to Su Yun, the surrounding temperature had already broken through 100,000 degrees. The ground was roasted red, and the buildings of the martial god sect were the same. However, the other party did not seem to plan to attack Su Yun directly, and stopped less than a kilometer away from Su Yun. The flames dispersed, and a little boy who was not more than 1.3 meters tall, dressed in a dark red loose robe, appeared in Su Yun's line of sight. The boy's skin was red, and there was a red lotus mark on his face. There were 2 horns on his forehead, and his eyes were like poisonous snakes. At the moment, he was hugging his chest with a strange smile on his face as he looked at Su Yun. Su Yun was startled. He looked at the child, and then looked at the back of the child's head, his head full of fog. Seeing Su Yun's actions, the child was stunned and asked, "What are you doing?" The voice that came out was thick and suppressed. Su Yun was also stunned and asked, "Where is your martial god sect leader?" "I am." The child clenched his teeth, and his eyes started to spit out flames of anger. Hearing that, Su Yun frowned. He looked at the child very seriously, from beginning to end, and then said seriously, "Are you lying? How could the dignified martial god sect look like a child like you? Impossible, you must be an impostor." "Humph. Stop talking nonsense, my body is just a vessel. Although my body is young, my soul is strong enough. But you, on the other hand, although you have the body of an adult, your mind and soul must be extremely weak. Despicable person, who exactly are you? Where did you come from? Are you really the sect leader of the martial god sect? You." The anger on the child's face was almost uncontrollable. Seeing that, Su Yun laughed and said, "Who I am is not important, the important thing is that I came here today to find a person. It is said that he has already reached the peak of the martial god realm. If you have any news of him, I hope that you can tell me as soon as possible." "Who are you looking for?" Of the sect." "Su Yun of the Sword. Ancestor sect. Captured by you guys?" Su Yun's face darkened. A wave of killing intent immediately pervaded his face. The child was startled, and his expression became solemn. "So what if I am? What do you want to do?" "Of course it's to save him." Su Yun snorted. His eyes suddenly lit up. Before the child could react, the space around him suddenly distorted. "Illusion technique?" The child cried out in alarm. He immediately spun his body. A large amount of flames shot out from his body, the flames quickly converged together, transforming into many fierce flame beasts. Some of the fierce beasts were like dragons, coiling towards Su Yun, coiling around him. Some of the fierce beasts were like whales, directly opening their mouths, intending to swallow him. The child's casual dance had turned the sky into a paradise for the fierce beasts of fire, and the flame beasts danced chaotically. But, facing the fire hell, Su Yun did not have the slightest intention of stopping. He stared at the child and rushed over, extending his palm forward. He grabbed the child who was still spinning. What? Seeing that his attack was completely immune to this guy, the child revealed an extremely shocked expression. How was this possible? The spells he cultivated were mainly for attack, and even immortals would find it extremely difficult to block his attacks, but this guy actually completely ignored his attacks. Dong! At this moment, a fist smashed onto the child's head, the huge force causing his entire body to tremble. The flames immediately stopped. The aura around his body was like a small boat being tossed about by a huge wave, trembling non-stop. He also directly fell to the ground. The child felt his mind go blank. What was happening right now had already caused his thoughts to be unable to keep up. However, before he could even land on the ground, his body was grabbed by another person. The child gritted his teeth. He knew that the person who came this time was not simple. He was not his match at all. However, he would not admit defeat just like that. He had already started to roar. "Bastard, don't underestimate me." His roar exploded, and the child's body spewed out a large amount of white gas. His hair instantly turned blood-red, and his eyes seemed to be burning with flames, making him look extremely terrifying. He let out a furious roar, and his aura instantly soared, with a terrifying aura that seemed like it was about to split the world apart. But at this moment, boom! A foot suddenly stomped down from above, directly trampling down the child, who was about to rise higher and higher like a god. The child was caught off guard, and his entire body fell to the ground, the flames on his body shattering like sparks hitting the ground. Bang! The ground also trembled. It was completely broken. All the attacks had been completely seen through and broken by the opponent. There was no chance at all, and even if he had managed to do so, the opponent did not care at all. In the distance, the people of the martial god sect were all dumbfounded, watching this scene in a daze. Defeated! And the defeat was so abnormally miserable. He had no power to fight back at all. How could this be? Even the sect leader was defeated. Who on earth was this person? Why was he able to have such powerful strength? These people of the martial god sect did not dare to believe what they had seen at all. In their hearts, their sect leader was an invincible existence, and no one could compete with him. Even if an immortal came to act wildly, as long as the sect leader was there was nothing to worry about. But this person who had appeared today. However, with his absolute strength, he had completely crushed this supposedly invincible sect leader. Not a single person in the entire martial god sect was able to subdue him. Perhaps it shouldn't be said that he was subduing him. It was already not bad to be able to contend against him. Although the people of the martial god sect could use the terrain to repel the immortals, right now, with just one person, they could not use the terrain advantage at all. Moreover, this guy did not seem to be an existence that could be dealt with by a large number of people. Before the child could stand up, he was lifted up by Su Yun with one hand. The imperial battle robe on his body released waves of light, crazily absorbing and devouring the immortal chi on the child's body. The child's face suddenly changed. He immediately wanted to restrain his chi and prevent it from leaking out, but it was all in vain. He could only watch helplessly as his chi was sucked dry by Su Yun. "You! Who the hell are you?" He opened his eyes in fear and looked at Su Yun, trembling. "Who I am is not important. What's important is the person I came here to find." Su Yun carried the child and said in a deep voice, "Now, immediately get someone to release that person. Otherwise, I will turn you into a meatball and refine your soul." Don't kill me," the child hurriedly said. Although his voice was still thick and sounded extremely awkward, this time, he no longer had the unyielding attitude from before and was completely admitting defeat to Su Yun. They had no choice but to admit defeat now. The strength that Su Yun had displayed was too unbelievable, such a powerful existence, they had no way of contending against him. "Then cooperate with me a little. Time is very precious, I don't want others to waste my time, otherwise, I will directly waste other people's lives." I actually didn't catch Sword Ancestor, but he did come here. The child's expression was a little strange, and he finally mustered up his courage and said, "So you're playing with me?" Su Yun's face darkened. No, I didn't mean that. Where is Sword Ancestor now? He's at the peak of the martial god realm. Aren't you talking nonsense? You want to play with me again? Su Yun was angry. He immediately raised his fist, planning to smash the child's head. But just as he raised his fist, the child anxiously struggled and shouted, "No! You're wrong, the position we're at right now can't actually be called the peak of the martial god realm. The real peak of the martial god realm is up there, at the very top." With that, the child raised his weak hand and pointed at the towering black pillar. Seeing that, Su Yun raised his eyes and looked at the top of the black pillar. The top of the black pillar pierced straight into the clouds, and although there was an end, the end was already very small. Standing below, even with his eyesight, he could not see it clearly, and if he were to reach the top from here, it would take him at least half a day to reach it at full speed. Why would Sword Ancestor run to the top? I don't know either, but he did go up. We tried to stop him, but he snuck up, and our people didn't have time to chase after him. Then why didn't you chase after him? There shouldn't be any roads up there, right? There is indeed no road, but that is a forbidden area, and we cannot set foot in it. Why? Is there anything up there? There's nothing, but there's a person. Who? Martial God, the child said. Chapter 1147. War God. Su Yun frowned and asked solemnly, "Who is this person?" "The true ruler of the peak of the martial god realm. We are just living under his command." The child's voice trembled. "Lord War God was actually here even earlier than us. He has always been at the peak of the martial god realm, never coming down. We do not know what he is doing there, because we cannot see him. Once we ascend to the peak of the martial god realm, we will immediately be killed by him, so we call that place a forbidden area." "Is that so?" Su Yun thought for a moment. He stared at the pitch-black pillar in the distance, then grabbed the child and flew into the sky. "You! Where do you want me to go? Let me go! Let me go!" The child's entire body was trembling, his deep voice came out one after another, and he was also struggling. But it was useless. Su Yun's hand was like the strongest cage in the world. No matter how he struggled, he could not break free. "Where are you taking me?" the child shouted at Su Yun. "The peak of the martial god realm." He stared at the pitch-black pillar in the distance, and said in a deep voice. Hearing that, the child's face turned pale. "You? What did you say? Go to the peak of the martial god realm? Are you crazy? We will be killed, we will all die. The power of the martial god is not something we can imagine. It is impossible for us to last a second in front of him." The child seemed to be completely intimidated by the power of the martial god. Upon hearing Su Yun's words, he shouted crazily, "I have to save the Sword Ancestor, but in order to prevent you from lying to me, I have to bring you here. The Sword Ancestor must be dead. It's useless for you to go. He must have been killed by the martial god. If Lord Sword Ancestor is really dead, then, you will have to accompany him in death." Su Yun was annoyed by the child, and shouted in a low voice. When the child heard this, his trembling voice became even more trembling. Su Yun flew towards the peak of the martial god realm, and was actually guessing in his heart, Martial god? The sect leader of the martial god sect also had the strength of a spirit profound immortal. It was not a problem for him to fight against immortals, but such a guy, just hearing the name of the martial god made him so scared. If he were to stand in front of the martial god, wouldn't he be scared to death? That martial god, what kind of existence was he? Before you came here, the martial god had always existed on the martial god summit? Su Yun asked the child as he hurried forward. That's right, the peak of the martial god realm was named after him. How do you know he's a martial god? He called himself a Valkyrie when he warned us. How strong? I can't describe it. I'm afraid you'll die in his hands. What is he doing there? I do not know. Really? Su Yun did not ask any more questions. As he approached the pitch-black sky pillar, a strange magnetic field came down from above. This magnetic field seemed to be able to affect the immortal power, and when Su Yun got closer, the flow of the immortal power in his body actually slowed down a lot. Su Yun frowned. He looked up. The mysterious magnetic force was floating down from the peak of the martial god summit. Was this the power of the martial god? Or was there some other existence above? Su Yun's heart was filled with suspicions. He also became more careful, following the magnetic field. He carefully flew up. His speed was neither fast nor slow. It was unknown how this stone pillar was formed, but on the way up, Su Yun discovered that there were a large number of runes on the thick and huge stone pillar. The edges of the runes were stained with blood, and the center was glowing with a white light. Su Yun stared at the runes. It looked like some kind of race's special words. What is this? Su Yun carried the child and asked in a deep voice. I'm not sure, but when I first came here, these things weren't there. This should have been carved by Lord Martial God himself. The child said nervously. Su Yun stared at the runes, as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, waves of chaotic and tyrannical auras swept over from above, as if a huge mountain was pressing down on them, causing them to be unable to breathe. This aura seemed to be formed from a mixture of many different auras, and it was extremely unique. Moreover, these auras seemed to be constantly colliding, as if they were fighting against each other. Su Yun immediately thought of the sword ancestor and the martial god. He did not know what was going on with the sword ancestor, but of course, he was not too worried about the sword ancestor's situation. With the sword ancestor's methods, he should not be destroyed by the martial god so easily. However, there was always a chance, so it was better to go and take a look. Su Yun completely ignored the magnetic field, but the child was different. All of the immortal chi in his body was sealed by Su Yun, so facing the magnetic field, he could not resist at all. Very quickly, his face flushed red, his eyes bloodshot, as if his entire body was about to explode. Su Yun did not wish for this fellow to die here, so he immediately activated his immortal chi and wrapped it around his body. Only then did the child heave a sigh of relief. Su Yun's speed was extremely fast, and the child could not withstand Su Yun's godly speed, so much so that he was constantly breathing heavily. In less than half a day, Su Yun could already see the top of the black pillar. It was a vast expanse of whiteness below, and he could no longer see the ground. Su Yun did not know how high it was, nor did he know how it came about. The magnetic field was already so strong that even he could not ignore it, but the tyrannical destructive aura was gradually weakening. Su Yun was a little suspicious. He focused his eyes and stared up, only to see that the sky above him was filled with a dazzling light, as though there were several sword images flying into the sky, but very quickly everything calmed down and disappeared. Oh? I didn't expect someone to dare to come here. It seems like there are more and more reckless fellows. A somewhat cold voice came from the peak of the martial god realm. Su Yun snorted. With a burst of speed, he rushed over and directly jumped onto the peak of the martial god realm. The peak of the martial god realm was the top of the black pillar. The top of the pillar was extremely flat, as if it had been cut by a knife, but in the center there was a gigantic colored stone. The colored stone was incomparably bright, emitting a weak light, and with it as the center, there was a gigantic blood array. Su Yun looked at the colored stone, his gaze immediately turned, and very quickly, he saw two figures standing on both sides of the colored stone. One of them was Sword Ancestor. Master Ancestor! Su Yun was overjoyed and immediately ran over. At the moment, Sword Ancestor was dressed in a brown blade master cloak, holding a light yellow sword in his hand. He looked to be in a sorry state, gasping for breath, his eyes staring straight at the person on the other side of the stone. There was an old man with white hair and a white beard. The old man was dressed in a snow-white robe, and he stood proudly with his hands behind his back. His sunken eyes were bright and full of expression, and he gave off an arrogant aura as if he was the only one in the world. The child was thrown to the side by Su Yun. After he landed, he immediately laid on the ground, trembling, not even daring to look at the martial god, as if the martial god was a fiend. Hearing Su Yun's call, Sword Ancestor was startled. He immediately turned his head and saw the person flying over. His face was filled with astonishment. Su Yun? Why are you here? Master Ancestor, I have something important to discuss with you, so I sent people to search for you. After knowing that you came to the martial god peak, I rushed over. Su Yun said. Let's talk about it later. Right now, let's think of a way to deal with this guy. Sword Ancestor took a deep breath and said. Su Yun nodded his head, his gaze shifted, looking at the white-haired old man, and said indifferently, This person, is he the martial god? Since you know my name, how dare you come here? The old man looked at Su Yun and said. But Su Yun ignored him, pointed at him and turned to ask Sword Ancestor. Master Ancestor, do you plan to kill this person? No, just repel him. Sword Ancestor looked at the large rock between the two of them and said, This person sealed one of my souls into the array formation under this strange stone and used it as the array source. If I do not take back that soul, I will not be able to collect all of my 3 souls and 7 spirits. This person actually stole Master Ancestor's soul? Su Yun secretly snorted, then asked, How many souls does Master Ancestor have right now? 2 souls and 3 spirit. If that's the case, then I've already gathered half of it. Su Yun was a little excited, but even more surprised. 2 souls and 3 spirits, this was only half of it. Did Sword Ancestor have such strength? Even he, who was a spirit god, could not see through the Sword Ancestor at this time. If he gathered all of his 3 souls and 7 spirits, what cultivation level would he be at? Could the 2 words spirit profound still describe him? This soul is extremely important to me. If I can seize it, my soul will be able to return to its original position, and my strength will definitely increase greatly. It will be much easier to seize the remaining 4 souls, but this person is not simple. He is a genius in the martial way. He almost never uses any immortal techniques, but he has a body of exquisite martial arts that ordinary people can't imagine. He is extremely powerful. It is not easy to defeat such a person. Your swordsmanship is not bad either. It's a pity that you met me. The martial god said solemnly. Su Yun held onto the lotus star sword tightly, his eyes becoming gloomy. I am Su Yun. Maybe Senior Martial God has not heard of me, but that is not important since I am here. I will naturally help Master Ancestor and take back his soul, but I wonder why Senior Martial God wants to use Master Ancestor's soul as the array origin? Can't Senior find another dead object to replace it? There is nothing purer and more suitable than his soul. My great formation, my divine stone, is related to whether or not I can truly surpass my peak, surpass my limits, and whether or not I can go a step further and become an existence that controls everything in the world. I cannot be careless, weak fellow. If you really want to take back this soul, you have to rely on your own abilities to defeat me and suppress me with force. If you can do this, this soul will be returned to you," the martial god said loudly. Hearing that, Su Yun raised the lotus star sword in his hand, the sword tip pointed straight at him, and said, "Then, come." Chapter 1148. Seeing that Su Yun had agreed so readily, the war god immediately laughed out loud. "What a confident fellow! He, this old man has not seen an existence as courageous as you in a long time. Good. Very good. Since you dare to fight me, then, come." With that, the war god assumed a stance. He took a step back and a step forward, his hands forming fists. He faced Su Yun, as though he was in a horse stance, looking extremely comical. But Sword Ancestor's face changed slightly. He shouted in a low voice, "Su Yun, don't be rash, you still don't understand how powerful this guy is. If you rashly attack, you will definitely suffer a huge loss." "Master Ancestor, you mean, you stay at the side, wait for me to fight him for a while, then you go up. This guy, if he fights with others, he will not rest until he dies. He will definitely kill you. If you do not know his tricks, if you make a mistake, I am afraid you will lose your life," the Sword Ancestor said in an extremely serious tone. Su Yun was startled. He wanted to say something, but the Sword Ancestor immediately shouted, "War God, there is still no result between us. What, you don't want to fight with me anymore? Are you afraid of me?" "Afraid?" The War God shook his head lightly. "Sword Ancestor, this is not the first time we have met. Do you think I am someone who is easily provoked? Then fight with me first, and after we decide who is stronger, you can fight with this junior. Otherwise, once he comes over, you will have to fight with this junior. If word of this gets out, wouldn't you say that you, the war god, are bullying the weak?" the Sword Ancestor said again. Hearing that, the war god sneered. "Sword Ancestor, don't think too highly of yourself. Forget it. The current you is no longer my opponent. If you had gathered your soul, I would still be afraid of you, but the current you is simply insignificant. The guy over there looks like he is only SOSO. Since you guys want to play, I will accompany you guys. This strange stone still needs a few days to sublimate. I have plenty of time. After I kill you, I will take care of that guy over there. Your blood might be able to help me accelerate this divine stone, allowing me to complete my plan as soon as possible." With that, the war god retracted his stance and walked towards Sword Ancestor. He looked indifferent, as though he did not place Sword Ancestor in his eyes at all. "How arrogant!" Su Yun narrowed his eyes. "He's not being arrogant." Just then, a melodious female voice sounded out in Su Yun's mind, causing Su Yun's entire body to tremble. "Qingyu? I didn't expect there to be such a capable person in this world." Ling Qingyu seemed to be paying attention to the battle between the Sword Ancestor and the martial god, and sighed. Su Yun was startled. He did not understand. Ling Qingyu's cultivation was not high. How could she understand such a level of battle? But what did Ling Qinyu mean by that? Su Yun turned his head, and once again sized up the martial god, but this time, he seriously examined the martial god, and realized that this seemingly careless and arrogant martial god was actually extremely serious. Every step he took seemed to be extremely casual on the surface, but the spot where his feet landed was a spot that could be attacked and defended at the same time. Furthermore, the moment his feet landed, Su Yun could clearly feel that the strength in his body was shrinking and condensing. It was precisely because of his seemingly free and easy steps that his aura and strength were able to rise so quickly in such a short period of time, and his entire being had entered a state of battle. He had never been careless. Even though his eyes were filled with the meaning of looking down on all living beings in the world, he had never underestimated any opponent. "It's begun." As the martial god walked, he spoke. The moment the word "gone" landed on the ground, his entire body disappeared. Su Yun's face changed. He immediately looked around, and realized that the entire martial god peak was enveloped by a strong and indescribable magnetic field, and the sky had also changed. A large number of auspicious clouds turned into a whirlpool, crashing towards him, but when they got close, they all disappeared. "It's open! It's open! Help!" When the child who was still crawling on the ground saw that the martial god had already made his move, he was so scared that his soul almost left his body. He immediately ran to the edge of the martial god peak and hugged his head, looking like he was at a loss of what to do. He no longer had the demeanor of a martial god sect leader. Su Yun had long ignored this guy. At the moment, he was more concerned about the martial god's current position. Rumble, 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 rumble. Just then, the air suddenly started to tremble like a curtain being blown by the wind, creating layers of light waves, and the place where the light waves were shaking was around Sword Ancestor. Sword Ancestor's expression was extremely focused. His eyes swept across his surroundings, but very quickly, he closed his eyes, and the light yellow sword in his hand was raised by him. Crash! Suddenly, the light yellow sword turned into smoke and disappeared. Seeing that, Su Yun suddenly realized that this sword was formed from the condensed chi of the Sword Ancestor. The sword turned into smoke and drilled into Sword Ancestor's fingertip. A golden chi whip swayed along with his fingertip. "Su Yun, you have to watch carefully. Although this battle is my battle, it will also be your battle." Sword Ancestor closed his eyes and slowly muttered. Su Yun nodded his head. He did not even dare to open his eyes, and looked over. Whiz! Suddenly, Sword Ancestor disappeared as well. Su Yun opened his eyes wide. He wanted to catch the figures of the two, but he could not find any traces of them. He could feel that Sword Ancestor and Martial God were nearby, but the surrounding air did not even tremble, only the space was constantly rippling. The two of them have already transcended the mortal realm and entered the saint realm. If you want to witness the battle between them, you can't do it with your naked eye. What you need to do is to rely on your mind's eye. Just then, Ling Qingyu's voice floated out. "Mind's eye? Right. Qingyu, you're right, the game between the two of them can no longer be measured by conventional method." Su Yun was awakened. He immediately closed his eyes, and used his own soul to feel it. Gradually, he was able to capture a bit of movement in his surroundings, and according to this movement, images began to appear in his mind. It was a very blurry image, but this image allowed Su Yun to clearly observe the game between Sword Ancestor and Martial God. He gradually became serious and proficient, and the scene also became clearer and clearer. The Sword Ancestor had been famous for a long time, and had left behind an illustrious name in the myriad heavens realm. Even in the immortal world, many immortals respected and feared him, showing how powerful he was. Although he only had 2 souls and 3 souls, the strength he displayed was truly astonishing. The whip in his hand was like a living body dancing in the air. His body was abnormally light and agile, and with a light movement of his arms, the whip would be flung away. Every time he was about to attack, the whip would straighten up into a sword and pierce forward, and if he was defending, it would become a thread and tie up the fist of the martial god. Although Sword Ancestor's moves were not considered gorgeous, they were extremely practical. However, if they were to fight head-on, the current Sword Ancestor was obviously not a match for the martial god. The martial god seemed to be aware of his huge disadvantage. Every attack was launched at the same time Sword Ancestor launched an attack. He wanted to fight with Sword Ancestor, and if Sword Ancestor attacked, it would be difficult to defend, and if he withdrew his attack to defend, the time would be too short, and the defense he made would not be perfect, and he would more or less suffer some losses. The martial god accurately and craftily grasped this point, so every time he waited for Sword Ancestor to attack, he was sure that Sword Ancestor would not dare to fight him head-on. He would not die immediately after receiving Sword Ancestor's sword, but if Sword Ancestor took a punch from him, although he would not die, he would definitely lose a large portion of his fighting strength, and it would be difficult for him to hold on for long. So ruthless. Su Yun clenched his teeth. It's also very despicable, but this is the most effective and unsolvable way to quickly defeat Sword Ancestor. Ling Qinyu said indifferently. You can see through his plan, Sword Ancestor can see through it even more, but how can you break it? The martial god had practically crippled Sword Ancestor's attack, and Sword Ancestor could only defend, but this defense was equivalent to half losing. Su Yun, didn't you notice? While the martial god was attacking crazily, he was also constantly on guard against Sword Ancestor's other methods. He knew that Sword Ancestor was not simple, so every time he attacked, although he did not exhaust any of his strength, after the attack ended, he would instantly change his defense. The time he took to change his defense was very short, and the duration was also very short, maybe not even a moment, but in this extremely short period of time, I believe that he had enough time to consider his next move. He really is a genius. Otherwise, how could he be called the martial god? Right now, when he is fighting with Sword Ancestor, he is only relying on brute force. The so-called immortal qi is not being used at all. Ling Qinyu said. Hearing that, Su Yun nodded his head seriously, but he was also curious. Why was Ling Qinyu able to clearly see the battle between Sword Ancestor and martial god? And she was able to see it so carefully? Maybe there were still many secrets on Qinyu that he did not know. Bang! Just then, the martial god attacked again. The Sword Ancestor did not retaliate. He continued to defend. The long sword whip wrapped around the martial god's arm, removing more than half of his strength. But when it hit the Sword Ancestor's body, the Sword Ancestor could not help but retreat. He stopped moving his body at a high speed, and gasped for breath. The current Sword Ancestor was completely at a disadvantage. Is that all you've got? Although I have an unfair advantage right now, you still have the power of 2 souls and 3 souls, so you should be able to use at least half of your strength. But why did I only use less than 1/10 of my strength to beat you into such a sorry state? The martial god shook his head and said indifferently, Seems like the legendary Sword Ancestor is just someone with an undeserved reputation. Hearing that, Su Yun, who was at the side, clenched his fists tightly. Don't say it too early, I haven't lost yet. The Sword Ancestor said. Then the sword whip in his hand suddenly disappeared, and behind him, a snow-white sword light rose. The surging sword intent suddenly rose, like a wave, it swept out in all directions. The entire peak of the martial god realm was filled with sword intent. Su Yun was slightly shocked. He stared at the sword intent. Limitless sword art? Chapter 1149. Hua. The halos behind Sword Ancestor quickly twisted into a golden disc. On the disc appeared a large number of imprints of divine swords. They alternated with each other, converging into a circle, and continued to rotate. Sword Ancestor's entire being was rendered like a god. Sword intent. It was filled with sword intent. It was completely filled with sword intent. In this move, Sword Ancestor relied entirely on sword intent. He opened his eyes wide, staring straight at this move. Sword Ancestor leaped into the air, golden light flashing like a sun. Heaven and earth divine fist. The war god bellowed and punched towards the sky. An inexplicable burst of brute force shot out from the tip of his fist, shaking the sky. Boom! The entire sky began to tremble and darken in an instant. Following that, a terrifying pressure descended from the heavens, as if a mountain was crashing towards them. Bang! Bang! When the pressure touched Sword Ancestor's body, it immediately caused a violent explosion, and the remaining pressure continued to descend. Su Yun looked over, the pressure touched his body, and also caused an extremely terrifying explosion. The destructive aura surged in all directions. In the distance, the martial god sect leader's immortal power was sealed, and he was unable to resist the pressure that came from the war god's miraculous power. His body instantly exploded, and he died. As for the entire peak of the martial god sect, it was as if it had been shaved off a layer. Other than the strange stone in the middle, the rest of the place had been split open, and it was a complete mess. Is this purely using brute force? But how did this pressure descend from the sky? Thousands of questions flashed past Su Yun's mind. He realized that he actually could not understand the war god's moves. He forcefully sent his brute force into the air, and then detonated it, causing it to descend from the sky and bombard the ground below. Ling Qingyu seemed to have sensed Su Yun's doubts and said, "Detonating brute force? Can that be done? Furthermore, what kind of power is there to disperse the power?" His main point is obviously not to rely on this attack to defeat Sword Ancestor. The reason he did this should be for the next attack, Ling Qingyu said. Hearing that, Su Yun immediately turned his head to look, only to realize that the martial god had moved again. The pressure seemed to be only to delay the Sword Ancestor's attack. When the pressure fell, it was impossible for the Sword Ancestor to not be affected at all, even if it was only for half a breath of time. It was enough for the group of martial god. In a fight of this level, any small flaw or mistake would determine the outcome of the battle. Although the two of them were powerful, and it was almost impossible for them to make mistakes, their so-called mistakes and flaws did not come from themselves. They were forcefully created by their opponents. The moment the pressure fell, the martial god rushed to the side of the sword master. He clenched his hands into fists and fiercely punched the sword master's head. He activated all of his power. In that instant, Su Yun could actually feel that the martial god's attack could shatter the entire ground. 1,000 swords pierced the heart. The sword ancestor's reaction was not slow at all. The moment the martial god got close to him, the golden wheel behind him released a myriad of rays of light, and every ray of light was actually a sharp sword. The closer he got to the sword ancestor, the more concentrated the sharp swords were, and the harder it was to dodge. Obviously, the sword ancestor had sensed the martial god's intentions from the very beginning, and had also planned to use this move to turn the situation around. He did not seem to want to continue defending, and he knew that if this continued, he would definitely lose, so he wanted to rely on this move to decide the outcome. Puchi 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 puchi, the terrifying sword of light directly pierced through the martial god's body. The martial god's body was already as strong as a god's, and ordinary blades and swords were unable to break through his body a long time ago. However, the sword ancestor's move was able to easily pierce through it, showing how powerful the attack power of this move was. However, rumble. The sword ancestor's body suddenly smashed into the ground from the sky, fiercely smashing into the martial god's summit below. Other than the strange stone and the formation area below, the rest of the area instantly shattered, and the entire martial god's summit that was close to 10,000 meters above the ground was shattered. Su Yun stood on the ground, and a portion of the power was transmitted to his body, and even he found it difficult to disperse the terrifying power, causing his body to tremble non-stop. Su Yun looked at the martial god in the air in astonishment, and found it hard to believe. The martial god's body had been pierced by the sword of light, and there were nearly 100 transparent holes in his body. He looked extremely miserable and terrifying, but his punch did not stop, and did not even weaken in the slightest. This punch had landed squarely on the sword ancestor's body. Su Yun's face was extremely ugly. He did not know if the sword ancestor could continue fighting after taking this attack. Without a doubt, the martial god's exchange this time had clearly decided the outcome of this battle. Although his entire body was filled with holes, the strength of his body was beyond imagination. That exuberant life force allowed him to survive even though his heart had been pierced through. Su Yun anxiously flew towards the sword ancestor. At the moment, the sword ancestor was still lying on the ground. The golden light behind him had already dissipated. His face was extremely pale, the corners of his mouth, eyes and ears were all covered in blood. The sword intent and immortal energy in his body had all been scattered by this terrifying attack. He had completely lost his fighting strength. The martial god had defeated the sword ancestor in an overwhelming manner. Sword ancestor! Su Yun shouted, rushed over, and immediately pressed on his chest, channeling immortal chi to repair the injuries in his body. But at this time, the sword ancestor fiercely grabbed his wrist. Idiot, don't waste your energy, you still have an opponent. The current you cannot waste even a single bit of immortal chi. Sword ancestor's voice sounded extremely strenuous, but his hand that was grabbing towards Su Yun seemed to be especially powerful. I have already used up a lot of this guy's strength, especially that attack just now. I can feel that he has definitely used up 20% of the strength in his body. Adding to the fight I had with him before, he probably only has 70% of his strength now. You won't be at a disadvantage against him. That's right. I've never been at a disadvantage. Su Yun held Sword Ancestor's hand tightly. Sword Ancestor, you should lie down for a while, don't talk anymore, quickly recover. What else do you need to recover? Let me tell you, if you can't beat him, then think of a way to run. Don't think that I was as stubborn as I was in the past. If I wasn't stubborn, I wouldn't have ended up in such a state. Don't worry, if I can't beat him, then run away has always been one of my principles. Hua! Just then, a burst of pressure descended from the sky once again. Su Yun turned his head, only to see that the martial god had already rushed over, and his terrifying fist was directly smashing towards him. Sword Ancestor, you can't do it anymore? Fine, since that's the case, then let me destroy you. The martial god did not show any mercy. The power accumulated in his fist was actually even greater than the previous attack. Before the fist even arrived, the ground split open again, and the entire martial god peak seemed to be shaking. The person who fell was like a falling meteor. The temperature instantly rose as he fell, and his aura was especially terrifying, as if this punch was going to destroy the world. What kind of breathtaking attack was this? Sword Ancestor opened his eyes wide, looking at the soul-stirring scene. He exclaimed, "Be careful!" Su Yun frowned. He immediately carried Sword Ancestor's body and scattered to the side. Boom! The upper half of the martial god peak shattered again, and the strange stone fell another 100 meters. This won't do. If this strange stone can't absorb the firmament essence here, it won't be able to quickly sublimate. The martial god frowned. He retracted his fist and looked to the side, only to see that Su Yun had already dodged to the side while carrying Sword Ancestor. His speed was extremely fast, and the martial god did not even have time to react. Such a fast speed, kid, your strength seems to be not bad, not bad, not bad. Since that's the case, then I will have to be serious. The martial god snorted, his expression becoming focused. Master Ancestor, you should retreat to the side and recuperate first. I'll deal with this person. Su Yun let go of Sword Ancestor and said seriously, "Be careful, just prepare to retreat." Sword Ancestor said, "Retreat?" Su Yun was startled, but did not say anything, only the corner of his mouth raised into a strange arc. It won't be that easy to escape. This old man hates cowards the most. All cowards must die. He growled and rushed forward again. That punch actually split into millions of fist shadows that blotted out the sky and earth as they smashed down. If all of these fists were to land on a person's body, it was unknown what would happen. Just then, a large number of sharp swords suddenly shot out from the sword sheath behind Su Yun. All of these sharp swords immediately lined up in front of him, forming a sword wall, the blade of the sword facing the martial god's incoming fist. Each sword body was covered with immortal energy. Seeing that, the martial god's face changed. He immediately retracted his fist and stopped his attack. If this punch were to go down, it would hit the blade of the sword. He would not be able to pull it out at all. My God! Cunning! The martial god stared at Su Yun and snorted. Su Yun did not say a word. However, Ling Qingyu, who was inside the sword sheath, spoke out. Su Yun, quickly retract your sword. Do not use the swords in the sword sheath anymore, if not it will only speed up the eruption of the vicious sword. Hearing that, Su Yun immediately removed the sword wall, his face revealing an awkward expression, and said, I'm sorry, I forgot. Su Yun, actually you don't have to worry, although this martial god's skills are extraordinary, and his martial arts attainments are extremely high, but your hard work over the years is not fake. You are not afraid of him, right? Ling Qingyu said. Su Yun chuckled, but his eyes became extremely resolute. Of course. With that, he took out the Lotus Star sword again, but he was not in a hurry to activate the sword chi. Instead, he assumed a stance, holding onto the Lotus Star sword with one hand. He stared at the martial god. The martial god seemed to have noticed something and snorted. Interesting, this old man has been lonely for so long. Today, I finally have some fun. Chapter 1150. Su Yun was unable to imagine how powerful the sword ancestor was at his peak, but without a doubt, this martial god was definitely not at the level of the sword ancestor at his peak. But to Su Yun, this was also an extremely powerful and terrifying opponent. In the past, after activating the Great Demon Saint and Great Demon Soul, those opponents were basically crushed without any difficulty. But this time, against the martial god, Su Yun did not plan to use the Demon Saint Devil Soul. He really needed an opponent to test his strength. Su Yun took a deep breath. He decided not to rely on those powerful magic treasure this time, and only relied on his own basic methods to fight the enemy. Swordsmanship? Sword control technique? Can your swordsmanship compare to the sword ancestor? You're dreaming if you think you can defeat me with that sword in your hand. The martial god sneered. He arrogantly looked at Su Yun as if he was looking at a pitiful ant. Don't be too arrogant. Su Yun's sword technique attainments are already very high. The sword ancestor said indifferently. High? How high can it be? The martial god suddenly extended his hand out and grabbed. This time, he unexpectedly gathered the immortal chi, but the immortal chi was not to attack Su Yun, but to transform into a gray sword, which he held in his hand. Since I'm called the martial god, I'm not only good with fists. I've also dabbled in sabers, spears, staffs, and clubs. Kid, let me see how high your attainments in swordsmanship are. With that, the martial god vanished once more. The space trembled violently as he approached Su Yun at a speed that exceeded his previous speed. Since one wanted to injure others with swordsmanship, one must first get close to the opponent. Other than the imperial sword technique, all other swordsmanship revolved around the target, surrounding them and stabbing them. The way of the sword was nothing but ever-changing. Whether it was a mortal using a sword or a deity using a sword, one must not violate this principle. Otherwise, what one was using would not be a sword. The might of a martial god's sword was no small matter. Su Yun did not dare to be careless. He immediately closed his eyes and felt the location of the martial god. Such a high-speed opponent could no longer be seen with the naked eye. Sword ancestors stared at Su Yun. The current him was heavily injured, and it was difficult for him to determine the location of the martial god. Although he had seen countless existences more powerful than the martial god in the past, he couldn't help but be subdued by the martial god's skills now. Suddenly, ripples appeared on Su Yun's right. Could it be here? Su Yun suddenly opened his eyes. But he swung his sword fiercely at the left side. Dang! The snow-white lotus star sword directly blocked the incoming war god's sword. The sword master was stunned and suddenly realized. It turned out that when the war god was about to make his move, he had first shaken the space on the right, attracting Su Yun's attention. At the moment, Su Yun was completely focused, but his entire body was tense. Any slight movement would attract his attention, and the killing intent would affect his judgment. At the same time that the void trembled, the martial god even deliberately released a strand of killing intent, intending to create an illusion, making Su Yun think that he would appear on the right side, and then move to the left with an explosive speed, intending to catch Su Yun off guard. However, he did not expect that Su Yun would not be fooled. The martial god suddenly swung his strength and knocked Su Yun away. His face was filled with fanaticism. It was unknown if he was angry or shocked. "All right. Good. Good. You are indeed the successor of the sword ancestor, to be able to see through my move." Hearing that, Su Yun kept his lotus star sword, and said indifferently, "This move of yours, is there anything unique about it? Are you provoking me?" The martial god's face gradually turned cold as he snorted. "Do you think that there is still a need to provoke me right now? It seems like I, the martial god, have been in this crappy place for too long, to the point that the world has forgotten about my existence, and can no longer feel my majesty. Good. Very good." The martial god seemed to be unable to stand Su Yun's arrogance anymore. The killing intent in his eyes exploded, and he rushed forward again. This time, the space shook violently, like a stormy sea. This time, the martial god did not choose to circle left and right, but directly attacked from the front. His sword was aimed straight at Su Yun. Without the immortal chi, there was only brute force left. He had already made up his mind to kill. If it was said that he was just casually exchanging blows with Su Yun before, then now, he was already going all out. Su Yun's entire body tensed up as he stared at the attack. Although the sword looked very ordinary, there were tens of thousands of different types of power in the sword edge. The tyrannical power, the gentle power, the sinister power, the scorching power. The martial god was indeed the martial god. This casual attack was something that many people would never be able to understand in their entire lives. However, of all the techniques in the world, only speed was hard to break. Su Yun placed his body and mind into an ethereal state, and suddenly moved. His speed was also extremely terrifying, but unlike the martial god who could directly cause space to tremble, Su Yun's speed was so fast that he directly disappeared into the void, like the wind. Endless divine power. The martial god seemed to have expected that Su Yun would dodge. His other hand immediately formed a fist. With a loud shout, the moment he clenched his fist, a burst of power burst out from his palm. The power spread out, floating in all directions, but it did not immediately disperse, but like ice it condensed in the area, and if a moving person touched the power, they would be blocked by the power. Su Yun was caught off guard. He suffered a lot of force, and his speed also slowed down a lot. So powerful, I never thought that power could be used like this. Su Yun was shocked. The martial god had brought him too many surprises, and today, he had truly broadened his horizons. "I'm distracted." Just then, the martial god suddenly grabbed onto a flaw in Su Yun's defense. With a loud shout, the gray sword directly slashed onto Su Yun's chest. Bang! The sharp sword did not pierce through the imperial battle robe, but it had taken away a lot of divine power. At the same time, the power on the sword was directly transmitted to Su Yun's body, causing him to instantly fly far away. Su Yun did his best to stabilize his body, and only after a long while did he disperse the energy on his body. When he stood still, he realized that the divine power on the imperial battle robe had been reduced by quite a bit. "What? It actually didn't pierce through you?" The martial god was startled, then he snorted coldly. "Seems like you still have a lot of incredible treasures." "I don't just rely on treasures." Su Yun was also a little angry. He did not want to be in a passive state. The martial god was proficient in calculations. He would always look for an opportunity to attack, and would not give Su Yun any leeway to counterattack. His strategy was to use a high-pressure attack to make Su Yun fall into despair, unable to counterattack. If this continued, Su Yun's disadvantage would become greater and greater, and the counterattack methods he possessed would also be weakened bit by bit. He increased his speed once again, activating the Divine Wind Sword technique. The power released by the martial god did not seem to be able to last for long. When the power disappeared, Su Yun rushed forward again, directly getting close to the martial god. The snow-white lotus star sword in his hand smashed forward at a speed that surpassed the speed of light. Su Yun, who was in the spirit god realm, was able to unleash more than 10,000 swords in a single breath. The torrential sword attacks were simply impossible to defend against. The martial god swung the gray sword in his hand. The sword images intertwined with each other like a raging storm. The two swords clashed, creating a series of terrifying explosions. The aftermath of the explosions even caused Sword Ancestor, who was in the distance, to be unable to withstand it. He retreated a few steps, looking at Su Yun, who was fighting against the martial god head-on. The surprise in his eyes grew bigger and bigger. I never thought that after not seeing him for so long, this kid's strength would actually increase by so much. His future is truly limitless. The martial god's face tensed up. The sword in his hand did not stop. This time, he was going all out. Suddenly, chi! A black light shot out from the snow-white sword. The martial god was stunned, but before he could react, the black light directly struck his chest. The terrifying destruction actually tore a large hole in his chest. Ah! The martial god immediately roared. The roar from his mouth was extremely shocking, and forcefully pushed Su Yun away. The two were forcefully separated. The martial god retreated to the side, looked down, and saw that his chest was rippling with evil chi, and then looked at Su Yun. He was holding onto a sword with one hand, and the snow-white holy sword was actually filled with dense evil chi, and an evil soul was jumping on the sword. Evil chi? Evil sword technique? The martial god narrowed his eyes. This move is called the Great Evil Sword Technique. Su Yun said indifferently. Great Evil Sword Technique? Interesting. The martial god's voice became heavy. The wound on his chest was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. His powerful life force was simply astonishing. Looks like I have to show some of my abilities, otherwise, I will be looked down upon by a junior like you. After the martial god finished speaking, he suddenly held onto the gray sword with both hands, and started to quickly dance his arms. The sword seemed to have come to life, and as he danced, it continuously trembled. Every time it danced in a circle, a layer of mysterious power would be attached to the gray sword. Sword intent? No, it was a type of willpower that was similar to sword intent, but even stronger than sword intent. He never thought that the martial god's attainments in the way of the sword would be so terrifying. Whiz! Suddenly, the martial god's body swayed. Following that, a huge and heavy sword chi that was as big as a mountain came crashing over. Su Yun immediately raised his sword to meet the attack, and the sword chi shot out. Dong! The sword chi released by the Lotus Star sword collided with the sword chi that was like a mountain. The sword chi trembled for a moment, but did not dissipate. Su Yun was startled and immediately dodged. The sword chi flew over and crashed into the distance. Hide? Let's see where you can hide. The martial god snorted. His body immediately swayed, and the gigantic sword chi that was like a mountain crazily shot out from the gray sword. This could no longer be called sword chi, it was completely a river of swords. The sword chi was continuous, there were almost no gaps, and it covered the sky and covered the sun, leaving Su Yun nowhere to hide. Crash! His body was immediately engulfed by the sword chi. The heart-tearing lung-splitting sword intent slashed at the imperial battle robe, causing the divine power of the battle robe to drop at an astonishing speed. In this way, it would not be long before the imperial battle robe would be completely destroyed, and Su Yun would be torn into powder by the strange sword chi. Chapter 1151. Power. This powerful and special sword intent that was like a flood was actually mixed with an endless amount of power. Su Yun could not imagine how the war god converted his own power into this mystical sword intent, but he understood that if he did not do anything, he would be completely torn into pieces by this sword intent. Su Yun. Quickly avoid it, do not fight it head-on, quickly leave. Sword Ancestor was anxious, his eyes gradually turned cold. He glanced at Su Yun, and then his gaze landed on the war god. A wave of killing intent floated out from his body. Master Ancestor, I want to leave, but I can't even leave now. This sword intent seems to be stuck to me, I can't move at all. Su Yun clenched his teeth and shouted. The divine power of the imperial battle robe became weaker and weaker, thinner and thinner, as though it was at the end of its tether, unable to persevere any longer. Su Yun's skin could already feel the terrifying tearing intent coming from the sword intent. Crap, I have to leave immediately, otherwise the consequences will be unimaginable. Su Yun's heart tensed up, his eyeballs swaying in all directions, but the sword intent's coverage was too wide. Within the sword intent, it was almost difficult for him to move. How difficult would it be to escape? Wait. Su Yun seemed to have thought of something. His gaze suddenly turned, and looked at the sword sheath hanging on his waist. Limitless sword sheath. Right, he could enter the limitless sword sheath to seek protection. How powerful was the sword sheath? To be able to seal the vicious sword, how could it be an ordinary magic treasure? Even with this strength, it would definitely not be able to destroy it. One had to know that the power of the vicious sword was countless times stronger than the war god's strength. Su Yun had an idea. He immediately activated the technique to open the sword sheath and enter. But right at this moment, a burst of dazzling rainbow-colored light suddenly erupted from his body. The imperial battle robe that covered his body suddenly changed. The surface layer that looked like it was about to be completely worn away by the sword intent suddenly produced a layer of glass color. This color dyed Su Yun's entire body with a myriad of colors. It was especially dazzling. When this color appeared, the light that was released swept out in all directions. The special sword intents around him were immediately destroyed, and a vacuum was created. The tearing intent that wrapped around Su Yun also disappeared without a trace. Su Yun was startled. He looked around blankly, his face full of astonishment. What's that? This power? Was it divine power? But it was completely different from the previous divine power. This was the purest form of divine power. What was going on? How did such a pure energy suddenly appear? The martial god was shocked. Su Yun's change this time was completely out of his expectations. What kind of magic treasure was that? In fact, the astonishment in Su Yun's heart was no less than that of the war god and sword ancestor. He lowered his head to look at the battle robe on his body, and was unable to recover from his shock. The light on the imperial battle robe was extremely dense. However, on the battle robe, a long and slender vein that looked like a river gradually appeared. These veins were like runes that were branded on the robe, and they were extremely snow-white and holy. This power, celestial pool? Su Yun was slightly startled, but his mind became clear. Could this power be the power of the celestial pool? If that was the case, wouldn't that mean that the imperial battle robe had absorbed the power of the celestial pool? There was such a possibility. Back then, when he went down to the celestial pool to absorb the power of the celestial pool, all of his magic treasures were destroyed by the water of the celestial pool, and there weren't many magic treasures left behind. Back then, the imperial battle robe also seemed to have signs of not being able to hold on, but in the end, it managed to hold on. Furthermore, the power of the celestial pool was actually effective against it? Su Yun could not understand. And in that short period of time, the power released by the imperial battle robe had already dispersed most of the war god's sword intent in the surroundings. Bastard! Seeing that even this move could not do anything to Su Yun, the martial god was enraged. He could not immediately defeat Su Yun, this junior. To someone like him who looked down on the world, it could be said to be a great insult. His arms suddenly swelled up, and the clothes on his left and right arms were torn apart, revealing his thick and powerful arms. His arms glowed with light, and a yellow male tiger pattern appeared on his left and right sides. Faintly, it seemed as if a fierce tiger was roaring. His power was boiling. Su Yun could clearly feel that the war god's arms were like two energy sources that would never dry up, surging with power from his arms. His strength was rising crazily, and the speed at which it was increasing was astonishing. At this moment, Su Yun was unable to describe how strong the war god was. If it was said that the war god could break the heavens with a single punch, he would believe it. Lowly and weak fellow, I will let you know what the consequences of angering me are. The war god roared in a low voice. Even his voice could shake one's soul and cause the immortal chi to be in chaos. Crap! This guy didn't even use his full strength when he fought us earlier. He was too strong. Su Yun, be careful. Don't take it head on. Faster. Run. The sword ancestor sensed that something was wrong and immediately shouted out. This move wasn't something an ordinary immortal could face, let alone resist it. He believed that no one would be able to withstand this attack. But, at that moment, Su Yun's expression became extremely focused. He stared at the war god with a serious expression in his eyes, as if he had made some sort of decision. He opened his mouth and said something that shocked the sword ancestor. No! I can't dodge this move. Not dodging. The sword ancestor thought that he had heard wrongly. He stared at Su Yun with his eyes wide open, and immediately shouted, Do you know what you are facing now? This attack must be the war god's full power attack. If you don't dodge, your body will definitely explode and your soul will scatter. You can't resist, Su Yun, your sword is light and agile, you need to constantly change the situation to find an opportunity, and now that you don't have an opportunity, the situation is not good for you. Master Ancestor, don't worry. Su Yun bellowed. This time, it is the only chance to decide victory or defeat. Hearing that, the sword ancestor was startled. He quickly calmed down and stared at Su Yun, feeling that he was not calm. Thinking about it carefully, since Su Yun dared to say such words, it meant that he had a bargaining chip. Since that was the case, he might not lose. At this point, if the war god did not lose, then Su Yun and the sword ancestor would die. Since Su Yun was already at a disadvantage, why not go all out? The sword ancestor stared intently at Su Yun. He did not make a sound, he only watched from afar. He stood behind Su Yun and did not escape. If Su Yun could not take this attack, the sword ancestor would definitely be implicated. This was a moment of life and death. Su Yun raised the Lotus Star sword in his hand, the sword tip facing the war god. He did not make any defensive stance. The imperial battle robe on his body also gradually dimmed, and there were no more ripples. Looking at Su Yun, he did not plan to activate it. Not defending? The sword ancestor and the war god both narrowed their eyes. Are you looking down on me? Good. Then go to hell. The war god could no longer hold it in. With a low roar, he punched out with both of his arms. The force that burst out from the tip of the two fists was like a heavenly wall that moved forward. The gray sword was directly shattered by the chi wall, and the torrent of sword intent from before was also instantly blasted away by the chi wall without a trace. The pressure skyrocketed. The chi wall seemed to want to crush everything, shatter everything, and cover the heaven and earth at an astonishing speed, covering the left and right horizon, shattering the earth, unable to see the top, unable to see the bottom, and unable to see the left and right side. Su Yun did not know how wide the range of this move was. He only knew that not only was there nowhere to escape to, it was also impossible to defend against it. Perhaps no magic treasure would be able to remain unscathed under such a powerful force, right? not to mention his physical body. Su Yun stared at the extremely vast wall of qi. The entire peak of the martial god realm seemed to have been stirred up by this attack. The majestic wall of qi had a concept of purifying the entire world. The war god stared at Su Yun with rage in his eyes, and the sword ancestor was also staring at Su Yun with rapt attention. The two of them did not even blink. Whiz! Just then, Su Yun swung his arm, and the snow-white lotus star sword in his hand actually flew out, crashing into the wall of qi. What? The war god and sword ancestor turned pale with fright. Su Yun. What was he doing? At such a critical moment, it was one thing for him not to defend, but he actually threw out his only weapon. The lotus star sword trembled, its flying speed was extremely slow, as though it could fall from the sky at any time. Sword ancestor would never believe that this sword would be able to break the wall of power that the war god had unleashed with his full strength. Then what was Su Yun planning to do by doing this? Give up? No. Impossible. Sword ancestor rejected that thought in his heart. Although he had not known Su Yun for long, he believed that Su Yun was not the kind of person who would give up so easily. Just then, Su Yun suddenly opened his eyes wide, and stared straight at the war god. His eyes became snow-white, and the light directly shot towards the war god. The war god's entire body trembled, as though he was affected. This is an illusion technique? Sword ancestor saw through Su Yun's methods. It's actually an illusion technique that can affect the war god. I'm afraid it's not simple. Wung 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 wung. Suddenly, a series of rapid trembling sounds rang out. It was especially abrupt at this critical juncture. Sword ancestor looked towards the source of the voice, only to see that the lotus star sword that Su Yun had thrown out had suddenly started to shake violently. No, it wasn't shaking, it was trembling rapidly. Sword ancestor stared at the sword, the shock in his heart growing bigger and bigger. The shaking of the sword was actually not the shaking that could be seen on the surface. It was caused by the rapid trembling of the sword body, causing the illusion that it was constantly shaking. Was the sword like this from the moment it was thrown out? Was it done by Su Yun? But why was it that as it continued to advance, the sword body shook more and more? The force that the sword body was enduring was also increasing. What kind of imperial sword technique was this? Chapter 1152. If Su Yun knew of the doubts in Sword Ancestor's heart, he would be extremely pleased with himself. Because this move was a sword technique that he had created himself, using strength to control the sword. Since the war god was using force to kill his enemies, then, wouldn't the endless power around him be used by Su Yun as well? The truth did not disappoint Su Yun. The lotus star sword that had been transferred with power flew out, and as expected, it started to absorb the war god's power. From the frequency of its vibrations, the lotus star sword had already absorbed more power than Su Yun's own. But this was not the end, it was only the beginning. The lotus star sword was like a boat going against the current, continuously moving forward. It absorbed the energy that was coming at it, and as it trembled, it absorbed all of the energy into the sword blade, transforming it into its own energy. Seeing the flying sword, the war god's face was filled with astonishment. He was surprised to discover that the power wall that he had released was slowly weakening as it approached the sword that Su Yun had thrown out. How could this be? The war god was confused, but right at this moment, the strange phenomenon appeared again, and the scenery around him suddenly distorted. The war god was shocked to discover that the figures of Su Yun and Sword Ancestor, who were extremely far away, had mysteriously dimmed down. What was going on? He looked around, feeling very uneasy. Everything was fine, so why was it like this? That's not right. This was that kid's method. The war god thought back to what Su Yun had done after he threw the sword. He didn't do anything, he just kept staring at me. Staring? The war god seemed to have thought of something and exclaimed, "This is illusion technique?" This was an illusion technique. Moreover, it was an incredible illusion technique, fleeting shadow art. This Su Yun's trump card came from the inheritance given to him by the great demons in the ancient tomb of the true devil sect. Once the drifting shadow art was used, it would ignore the opponent's strength and directly corrode the opponent's spirit. Normally, with the continuous activation of the drifting shadow art, the opponent would gradually lose sight of Su Yun, and after that, his mind would gradually forget about Su Yun. In the end, the person who was used by the drifting shadow art would no longer know about Su Yun, nor would he understand who he was fighting with. However, although this technique could be used regardless of the opponent's cultivation, it could not avoid the opponent's spirit. The stronger the spirit, the less effective the fleeting shadow art would be, and the more difficult it would be. However, no matter how strong a person's spirit was, they would not be able to avoid the invasion of the fleeting shadow art. Even the true divine power would be affected by the fleeting shadow art, and as time passed, the influence would grow stronger and stronger. The martial god realized that he had fallen into Su Yun's illusion technique, but he was powerless to do anything about it. The hatred he had for Su Yun was extremely huge, but it was gradually lessening, because the impression he had of Su Yun was constantly weakening. Success. Su Yun, who was still clenching his teeth and using the fleeting shadow art on the war god, was overjoyed when he saw this. This was an opportunity. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he could not defeat the war god at this time, then he would no longer have any leeway to contend against the war god. Su Yun did not dare look at the Lotus Star Sword. The current Lotus Star Sword was no longer under its control. It was trembling at an extremely high frequency that even Su Yun could not recognize, and at the same time, the sword body was pressing forward bit by bit, flying extremely slowly. However, as it was flying, it was also constantly absorbing the power of the Qi wall released by the war god. It was the Qi wall that prevented it from flying, and once the Lotus Star Sword completely passed through the Qi wall, its speed would rise to an unprecedented height. In the center of the incomparably vast Qi wall, a huge hole was directly opened up by the Lotus Star Sword, and all the Qi there was absorbed. It was difficult for it to move, but the thickness of the Qi wall was less than 1,000 meters. According to the Lotus Star Sword's speed, it would probably be able to pass through the Qi wall in another 30 breaths, and the 31st breath would be the moment the war god fell. Ugh! Just then, Su Yun suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, his body trembling violently. His expression tensed up, he felt a strong pressure on his body, and his back was constantly being hammered by something. It was the war god's method. No, the war god had already released the Qi wall. Why would he still use other methods? Could it be that before the war god used the Qi wall, he had intentionally used a hidden technique to prevent himself from escaping? It was extremely possible that this power was only responsible for suppressing Su Yun, but did not have much killing intent. If he wanted to restrain Su Yun, it was definitely enough. But the current Su Yun did not dare to move casually. After activating the shadowy art, if he moved casually, or even if the immortal Qi in his body became chaotic, it would cause the activation of the shadowy art to fail. And after losing the restriction of the shadowy art, with the trajectory of the Lotus Star Sword, it was impossible for it to hit the war god. Bang! 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 The blood Qi in Su Yun's body was churning, the immortal meridian was like a zither string, constantly trembling. The immortal Qi had already started to become chaotic. He was getting more and more exhausted. The current him did not have much strength left. Almost all of his immortal energy was used to activate the shadowy art. Hold on. He had to hold on. Su Yun thought, gritting his teeth. He refused to let go. He was not afraid of pain. After so many years, he had long been immune to pain, but sometimes, not being afraid of pain did not mean that he was invincible. His consciousness still existed, and his consciousness would still be in chaos. Right now, he could only rely on his own willpower to forcefully activate the shadowy art. The Lotus Star Sword only had 15 breaths of time left. In another 15 breaths of time, it would be able to directly attack the war god. His teeth were bleeding, and his snow-white eyes were almost incomparably bright. However, his pupils were still shaking, as if they were about to jump out of his sockets. 10 breaths, 9 breaths, 8 breaths. Su Yun used the corner of his eyes to quickly scan the Lotus Star Sword, but the current his consciousness was gradually weakening. He gasped for breath, but found that it was getting harder and harder to breathe. The immortal meridian in his body was stretched to its limit, showing signs of breaking at any time. The immortal chi was almost exhausted, and his immortal eyes were also turning red. 5 breaths, 4 breaths. More and more blood flowed out of Su Yun's mouth, and his face became paler and paler. Was it the limit? He felt his eyelids become heavier than ever before. 3 breaths, 2 breaths, crash. In that moment of life and death, a burst of sword intent suddenly rippled around Su Yun's body. So. The energy that was surrounding Su Yun was immediately dispersed by the sword intent. This was the sword ancestor's move. However, Su Yun did not have the time to look at sword ancestor. He suddenly turned his head and stared at the Lotus Star Sword. At this moment, the center of the entire chi wall had been completely pierced through by the Lotus Star Sword. Its sword tip had already passed through the back of the chi wall. 1 breath. Su Yun muttered to himself, and then, he instantly closed his eyes and fell down. Rumble, 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 rumble. The Lotus Star Sword was like a god-slaying sword that had broken free from its restraints. It instantly rushed towards the martial god in the distance, bringing with it an intense roar that sounded like that of an ancient demon god. It charged straight into the distance. The entire sky distorted, the ground instantly cracked, and the seemingly towering peak of the martial god was instantly shattered. This Lotus Star Sword that was mixed with all of Su Yun's and the martial god's power, at this moment, released a dazzling attack that caused even the gods to tremble. When Su Yun closed his eyes, the martial god who was controlled by the fleeting shadow art immediately woke up, but at that moment, everything was over. The Lotus Star Sword was right in front of him. The strong air pressure had already started to squeeze the martial god's body, causing his face to immediately become distorted. His white beard swayed wildly and then fell off one by one. His strong body also became thin and weak, and not long after, it was completely deformed. He was actually unable to resist this tyrannical pressure. Su Yun fell down. He used his last bit of strength to open a crack in his eyelids, and looked at the martial god. The Lotus Star Sword was less than 1,000 meters away from him. Although it was close to 1,000 meters, the Lotus Star Sword's speed was simply too fast. To be able to capture its position was already a miracle, and it was impossible to dodge. The martial god's face changed. His heart almost jumped out of his throat. Hiss at this time, a slender white thread flowed out from the direction of the Lotus Star Sword. Su Yun opened his eyes wide, looking at the thread. His dark eyes were filled with complexity. It was the Lotus Star Sword's body. Such a powerful impact force had completely exceeded the strength of the Lotus Star Sword. The moment it rushed towards the martial god, the sword's body had already split open, and when it attacked, it was like a meteor that streaked across the sky, consuming itself while bringing hope to others. Boom! There were no surprises. There was no suspense. A huge hole was created in the martial god's chest, and his flesh was sent flying into the distance. It was gradually torn apart, turning into fragments, particles, dust, and finally disappearing. His body trembled a few times, and in less than a breath of time, his entire body was torn into pieces. He died immediately, not even leaving a trace behind. Although the Lotus Star Sword had consumed its sword body, the impact force that was attached to its body did not disappear. Under the push of inertia, they continued to charge towards the martial god. Even the blood was knocked away by the force. In the blink of an eye, nothing remained where the martial god was, not even his soul could be seen. The martial god was instantly killed. What kind of terrifying attack was this? What kind of powerful attack was this? Even a true god would never be able to release such a powerful destructive method. Sword Ancestor opened his eyes wide. He looked at Su Yun, and was unable to say a word for a long time. Is it over? Su Yun stared at the empty space, muttered, and completely fainted. Seeing that, Sword Ancestor, who was in the distance, immediately rushed over and hugged him. It's all over. Sword Ancestor looked into the distance and said in a low voice. Everything had returned to normal. Chapter 1153. After defeating the war god, Sword Ancestor carried Su Yun's body and slowly landed on the ground. At this moment, the entire ground had been shattered, and the so-called martial god sect had also vanished into thin air. When the immortals fought, the mortals suffered. This was the result. The peak of the martial god realm was in a mess, and there was no longer a complete place to be found. The stone that the war god called a strange stone had also fallen and smashed into the ruins. However, it was rather miraculous. Not only was it undamaged, even the area below it that was drawn with the array formation was not damaged at all. Su Yun opened his eyes slightly, looked at the strange stone, and could not help but sigh. The war god was right. Just this point alone was enough to prove that this was indeed a strange stone. Sword Ancestor walked to the front of the strange stone and pressed on it with one hand. With a slight push, circles of strange bright white lines immediately appeared on his palm. These lines spread out like a spider web and quickly wrapped around the strange stone. A moment later, Kacha the strange stone loosened a lot. Seeing that, Sword Ancestor immediately gathered his strength and pushed. Kacha, Kacha, Kacha the strange stone immediately rolled away, pressing down on the broken stones and falling into the distance. The area with the array was also completely exposed to Su Yun and Sword Ancestor's line of sight. This was a formation similar to a lotus flower, but it seemed to be smeared with the blood of an immortal, and the immortal chi inside was extremely mysterious. The Sword Ancestor walked to the center of the array and sat down cross-legged. From afar, the light figure looked extremely similar to the Sword Ancestor, and the moment it appeared, it immediately crashed into the Sword Ancestor's body, causing the Sword Ancestor's body to emit waves of lustrous light. Su Yun stared at it carefully without blinking. With a flash of light, the aura around Sword Ancestor quickly condensed and became extremely dense. Who? Sword Ancestor exhaled heavily. The light around his body immediately became stronger, and at the same time, the wounds on his body were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. His face had also become rosy, and his mental state had reached its peak in a few breaths of time. This kind of thing could simply be called a miracle. Su Yun was a little sluggish. After an unknown period of time, Sword Ancestor slowly opened his eyes, revealing a gentle smile on his face. Not bad, another soul. Looks like it's only a matter of time before my soul completely returns. The Sword Ancestor laughed. At this moment, the way he spoke was much gentler than before. Sword Ancestor, do you feel that I've changed a lot from before? Yes, haha, that is the influence of the soul. Actually, my 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls have taken up quite a bit of my personality. This soul is the benevolence and compassion in my heart. Thus, when I fused with this soul, my personality also changed. The power contained in this soul entered my body, allowing my damaged body to recover. That is why there is such a miraculous change. The Sword Ancestor laughed. Hearing that, Su Yun nodded, as if he was deep in thought. Su Yun, this strange stone was painstakingly obtained by the war god. Although it lacks my soul as the array source, it does not mean that it cannot be replaced with other things, such a treasure cannot be wasted. Su Yun, during this period of time, follow me to get a magic treasure to replace this array source, activate the array formation to consume this magic treasure, and then use this treasure to raise your cultivation. Do you understand? Just then, the sword ancestor said. How can this be? Master Ancestor, you should need this, right? I don't need this, because my power has not been completely gathered, and it's not of much use to me. The sword ancestor shook his head. Hearing that, Su Yun immediately understood, although the current sword ancestor's strength was not as strong as before, and was even weaker than the war god, but after gathering his soul, his strength was at the legendary level, and was not something that ordinary immortals could imagine. Such a powerful existence was not something that the war god could compare to, so how could he need this stone to increase his strength? Master Ancestor, let's talk about this later. Today, Su Yun came to find you because he has something to discuss with you. Su Yun threw the strange stone to the side and immediately said to the sword ancestor, You have something to discuss with me? The sword ancestor was startled and said, What is it? It's about the evil sword. Su Yun took off the sword sheath and placed it on the ground. Upon hearing the word, evil sword, the sword ancestor's face immediately became serious, and his eyes became extremely serious. What happened to the evil sword? The sword ancestor said in a low voice. According to Ling Qingyu, the divine sword barrier around the evil sword has loosened, because I have previously taken a portion of the divine swords from this sword sheath to fight, so, it's not your situation. The divine sword inside can be taken out. There must be other reasons for the evil sword to loosen. The sword ancestor shook his head, then asked curiously, But the Ling Qingyu you spoke of? Su Yun did not understand. He looked at the sword ancestor strangely and said, Master Ancestor, don't you remember? You saved a female sword immortal before. In order to repay you, she attached herself to the sword sheath and has always been following you. Didn't I tell you about her before? Did you? The sword ancestor thought for a moment, but could not think of anything. Just then, a white light shot out from the sword sheath and directly landed beside Su Yun. The white light transformed into a beautiful and charming lady. The lady's white clothes were as white as snow, her skin was like sheep fat, her eyes were bright and her teeth were white. She was extremely beautiful. Seeing the man appear from the sword sheath, the sword ancestor immediately took half a step back and stared at him. Who is it? I am Ling Qingyu, the lady said. Su Yun, who was at the side, was confused. Why did sword ancestor look like he did not know Ling Qingyu? That's not right. Logically speaking, the sword ancestor should have known Ling Qingyu even earlier than him. For people of their level, how could they be forgetful? Qingyu, what's going on? Su Yun asked. It should be because the sword ancestor's soul is incomplete, and his memories are missing. Ling Qingyu said indifferently without hesitation. That was possible. Su Yun nodded. Memory loss? Is that so? The sword ancestor did not seem to believe Ling Qingyu's words. He sized her up, then turned his head and asked Su Yun, Has this person always been in the sword sheath? Yes, Master Ancestor. From the moment this disciple obtained the sword sheath, she was here. The sword elder also knows about her. The sword ancestor scratched his chin and thought for a while, then shook his head and said indifferently, Now is not the time to talk about these useless things. Since there is a problem with the evil sword, then it must be no small matter. Since no one in this world knows of the existence of the evil sword, then they must be responsible for it. Su Yun, don't waste time, hurry up. The sword ancestor said. Although he knew the power of the evil sword, and understood how dangerous it was for him to do so, he still did not show the slightest bit of fear, and still surrounded them. The sword sheath was opened, light overflowed in all directions, and a circular hole appeared. The sword ancestor glanced at Ling Qingyu, then looked at the hole, and finally walked inside. Crash! Very quickly, the The three of them disappeared from the entrance of the sword sheath. After entering the sword sheath, the sword ancestor stood on the stage and stared into the distance, while Su Yun followed behind. When Ling Qingyu flew in, he circled around the two of them, then said, "Do you plan to check on the evil sword's sword seal now, or do you want to go later? You seem to have a good understanding of the evil sword's sword seal? I've heard you say it before. After I left, I would sometimes go to the sword sheath's world to wander around, so it's only natural that I have some understanding of the evil sword. There are some things that even if you don't tell me, I still know." "Is that so?" The sword master rubbed his chin, then said indifferently, "Since you are so familiar with this place, then you can lead the way for us." This place has been in the future for a long time, and I am not very familiar with many places. In addition, there are still some changes in this place, so naturally you know it better than me. After Su Yun took the sword, the position of the sword discourse arena changed. Ling Qingyu nodded. Without saying a word, she flew forward. Su Yun looked at the sword ancestor in confusion, but still followed. The two of them passed through dozens of sword discourse arenas and flew forward for a full 5 hours before stopping. Su Yun still did not understand how big the sword sheath's world was. Maybe only Ling Qingyu was familiar with this place. As they flew, a large black whirlpool of clouds slowly appeared in their line of sight. This cloud was like a constantly twisting whirlpool. It was extremely black and extremely terrifying, as though it was the bloodline of an evil demon. And in the center of this pitch-black whirlpool of clouds, there was a pitch-black shadow that towered between the heaven and earth. From the shape of the shadow, it seemed to be a sword. The sword body pierced through the center of the whirlpool of clouds, and the sword hilt was extremely long, its top could not be seen. The sword body was also extremely long, and the tip of the sword could not be seen. There was no longer any sword intent here, nor was there any sword force. The clouds and mist revolved around the gigantic sword image and gently swayed. The scene was exceptionally peaceful and tranquil. The sword ancestor looked at the gigantic and pitch-black figure in the distance, took a deep breath, and said, "It's as if everything is the same as before, nothing has changed." "Master Ancestor, is this the evil sword?" Su Yun asked. The sword ancestor nodded. "It doesn't look like there's anything special about it?" Su Yun looked at the gigantic light figure in the distance and said, "Something special? Su Yun, you can't just look at things on the surface. If you do that, you will never be able to see the true appearance of things." Just then, Ling Qingyu flew over and said indifferently. With that said, she raised her jade-like finger, and with a wave of her finger, a strange and mysterious power spread out from her finger, spreading into the distance. In that moment, the scene in front of Su Yun's eyes immediately distorted. As the scene continued to distort, the true scene of the evil sword appeared in his line of sight. Chapter 1154. The peaceful sword image and the black cloud had long disappeared, and what replaced it was a gigantic black sword body that stood between the heaven and earth, like a pillar piercing into the ground in front of Su Yun. The sword body pierced through the heaven and earth. The clouds and mist floated around the sword body, and the pitch-black gigantic sword body was currently tied with a large number of thick and sturdy chains. The crisscrossing chains were countless, they were tied to the sword body. It was extremely terrifying. Around these chains were countless flying swords. Every single one of them was trembling slightly. They were like stars in the sky, slowly floating around the gigantic pitch-black sword, releasing waves of light sword cries. Seeing this scene, Su Yun was stunned. The sound of the divine swords trembling in the sky was like a mournful roar, causing people's hearts to tremble, and they were extremely shocked. What was even more surprising was that the arrangement of the divine swords that filled the sky seemed to be messy, but it was orderly, and there was a connection between the swords. They seemed to be a whole, each of them playing their own role, but also making up for their own role. Plop! At this time, an extremely loud heartbeat sound rang out in the vast world of the sword sheath. Su Yun was shocked. He looked towards the source of the sound, only to realize that the sound actually came from the gigantic ominous sword. At this moment, a layer of red light bloomed on the surface of the ominous sword, and on its gigantic sword body, there were a large number of veins floating about. These veins were extremely blood-red, like blood vessels, densely packed all over the sword body, looking extremely terrifying. The surrounding divine swords trembled even more violently. Qingyu, what's going on? Su Yun immediately turned his head and looked at Ling Qingyu, but just as he turned, he realized that Ling Qingyu had long disappeared, and he did not know where she went. Qingyu! Qingyu! He called out twice, but he still could not see Ling Qingyu. Sword Ancestor did not seem to care about Ling Qingyu. At the moment, all of his attention was attracted by the ominous sword in front of him. He flew forward slowly and carefully. As he got closer, the sword will in the surroundings gradually rose. The edges of the divine swords also swayed gently and began to face them. At this moment, the power of the divine swords and the ominous swords is actually equal. The ominous swords have been greatly affected by the strange power within the sword case, and their power has greatly decreased. Due to the number of divine swords and the sword formation, their power has greatly increased. With this increase and decrease, they are able to fight against each other. The scene you saw before is actually just an illusion released by the ominous swords. At this moment, it seems to have fallen into some kind of frenzy. Because of this frenzy, its power has increased slightly, causing this balance to be broken. The formation formed by the divine swords within the sword case is starting to be unable to suppress it. Thus, there is a crisis. Even the slightest imbalance will cause the boundary that seals the ominous swords to break. With that, Sword Ancestor descended and stepped on a pitch-black cloud. Su Yun followed. He lowered his head and looked down at the clouds, and realized that within the clouds there was an extremely ruthless aura, as though it was contaminated by the evil aura of the ominous sword. Sword Ancestor squatted down, extended his hand and lightly tapped the ground. A transparent ripple spread out from his finger, and quickly spread out in all directions. After a moment, it spread throughout the entire area, directly crashing into the distance. Su Yun did not know how big the ominous sword was, but it was said that the entire sword case just happened to be able to contain it. Su Yun had never been able to imagine what kind of sword it was, and what kind of existence it was. But from the looks of it today, he seemed to understand a little. As the ripples spread out, layers of strange energy bodies floated between the countless divine swords. These energy bodies were like a gray mist that floated between the divine swords. Seeing the layer of gray mist, Su Yun's expression tensed up and asked, "Could this be the formation that sealed the ominous sword?" "That's right." Sword Ancestor carefully moved between the gray mist and the divine swords, as though he was inspecting the formation. Every part of the array energy here is formed from a special sword intent that has been painstakingly collected, and every sword is also formed from searching the myriad heavens realm. They have gathered to form the huge sealing sword formation in the sword sheath's world, and they have been resisting the ominous sword for all these years. If not for these divine swords, if not for this formation, if not for the appearance of the ominous sword, I'm afraid that not a single thing in this world would exist. As Sword Ancestor spoke, he carefully inspected everything. Su Yun thought for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "I shouldn't hide it, it's too unfair to let the Limitless Sword Lord bear all of this." "So what if it's unfair? There are too many injustices in this world. If I don't hide it and ask for help from others, I might be able to get the help of many powerful existences, but it will definitely attract the attention of countless people. There are pros and cons, and the myriad worlds will be in chaos, and all living beings will be plunged into misery and suffering." Sword Ancestor said. Hearing that, Su Yun secretly clenched his fists and did not say anything else. Crash! A cool breeze blew over from afar and landed directly on the grassland. This was the edge of the peak of the martial god realm, and also the front of the distorted space that led to the ultimate martial world. This was a dead end, and everyone knew it. However, many people, in order to enter the peak of the martial god realm, would always think of ways to take the unorthodox path, and in fact, there were quite a few secret paths that led to the peak of the martial god realm. This place was close to the sea, and the ground was not as scorched as the inside. Instead, it was filled with greenery and vitality. A large road that led to the other side twisted in front of him. With a bang sound, something seemed to have fallen here, directly smashing a large hole in the ground. The surrounding seawater rippled. A large pit appeared, and dust flew everywhere. After a moment of silence, a bit of movement came out from within the pit. A blurry and hazy figure floated out from inside. The figure looked around, his face filled with nervousness and pain, as if he was guarding against something. If someone was here, they would definitely be able to tell that this was a soul. A human soul had no weight at all. It could fly with the wind and was even lighter than a leaf. No one's soul would fall to the ground, much less create a large pit. However, this soul could, which was enough to show that this soul was not simple. At this moment, the soul seemed to have sensed something. It suddenly turned its head and looked to the side. He then felt the sound of footsteps that were neither light nor heavy nor slow coming from the grass at the side. What is this? A slightly cold female voice came out. The soul looked towards the source of the voice and saw a young lady wearing a white robe with red edges. She was holding a dark green longsword as she walked out from the grass. It was obvious that she was attracted by the commotion here. When she saw the soul, the young lady's expression immediately became strange. A soul? Could it be that you were the one who caused the commotion just now? Humph! Where did this girl come from? She doesn't know what's good for her, and actually dares to run to the peak of the martial god realm. Quickly scram, or else this old man will take your life. At this moment, the soul suddenly let out a low voice, and directly spoke. Who are you? The young girl felt that the soul was not simple and immediately shouted. I am the martial god. The soul shouted. So it turned out that he was the martial god whose body had been destroyed by Su Yun's sword. At that time, when Su Yun had activated the power of the imperial sword, he had used the power of the martial god to forcefully break through his defense and shatter his body. However, although the attack had been successfully launched, the Lotus Star Sword was unable to withstand such a strong attack, and the sword body immediately shattered, causing the attack to only be a simple force. In the nick of time, the martial god had used his own magic treasure to seal his soul, and then used this force to escape 1,000 miles away. Su Yun and Sword Ancestor were not in a good state. They did not catch the martial god's small movements, and even thought that Su Yun's terrifying attack had destroyed his soul. Martial god. The young lady's eyes glistened as she harumphed. A martial god at the peak of the martial god realm is extremely powerful. It's almost like a legend. Even immortals can't stand a chance against one. However, it seems like only your soul is left. Your flesh must have been destroyed by someone. How could you be a martial god in such a miserable state? Don't brag. Girl, you don't believe me. If I don't believe it, there's no need to believe it. I came here to take the martial god as my master. Although I have never seen the martial god before, I know that he is an invincible existence in this world, a mythical existence. However, your soul is indeed extraordinary, and such a soul is extremely rare. Since I have encountered your soul, then let me take it and refine it into a pill to increase my strength. After the young girl finished speaking, she directly walked towards the martial god's soul. Although this soul belonged to the martial god, it had lost its physical body and only had a soul. Forget about the martial god, even the soul of a true god would be helpless at this moment. Girl! Stop! The martial god shouted. What is it? Is there anything else you want to say? The young girl did not stop walking, and it seemed that she had made up her mind. I only have one thing to say. The martial god's soul stared at the young girl, and stared into her eyes. I'm listening. She did not stop walking. Although she said that, she did not show much interest in the soul's words. Do you desire power? At this moment, the martial god's soul suddenly asked. However, this single sentence immediately stopped the young girl in her track. She frowned and looked at the martial god's soul. What did you say? I asked you, do you desire power? The martial god repeated calmly. I can see your desire and madness for power in your eyes. Girl, I can satisfy you, I can give you supreme power, and you can walk further and faster on the path of martial arts. Now, let me tell you, if you don't kill me and help me complete one task, then I will teach you everything I have learned, so that you will immediately have the means to fight against immortals, and you will become the new martial god. What do you think? Are you willing? His words were filled with endless temptation. Chapter 1155. After inspecting the array seal once, it took a full 2 days of time. The sword formation was simply too big. The sword ancestor was like a ray of light shuttling back and forth around every sword, floating in between every gray mist, but he had only checked the core area of the sword body. If he wanted to check the periphery, it would be impossible to do it without at least 10 days to half a month. After inspecting the core area, the sword ancestor heaved a sigh of relief and returned. Master Ancestor, how is it? Su Yun asked. There's no problem with the sword formation, but the aura of the evil sword is even stronger. The sword formation can't hold on any longer. The sword ancestor said with a serious face. The aura of the evil sword is stronger? What was going on? Could it be that the aura of the evil sword has been increasing? Su Yun asked in shock. No. The sword ancestor shook his head. The aura of the evil sword usually does not increase, it will only increase its aura under one circumstance, and increase its power. What's going on? In despair. The sword ancestor read out these 4 words. Despair? Yes. Despair. The sword ancestor said in a deep voice. I do not know much about the evil sword, its power is too complicated, but as far as I know, one of the main conditions for the evil sword to increase its power is to absorb a large amount of the power of despair. It is currently in the sword sheath, and the sword sheath is following you along the way. You will encounter too much despair, and will be quietly absorbed by it. In other words, I caused the power of the evil sword to increase greatly? That's not it either. Anyone who gets close to the sword sheath will have the power of despair absorbed by it, and the evil sword does not only rely on the power of despair to increase its power, it also has too many channels. I am unable to explain how it was born, and no one knows what it is made of. In fact, Su Yun, letting you carry this sword sheath, is actually very unfair to you. After all, once you carry this sword sheath, you will have to bear too many things. When the sword ancestor said that, he sighed heavily. Since it's already like this, we still have to continue walking the rest of the road. Su Yun said indifferently. The sword ancestor was silent for a moment, then nodded his head. He turned his head and looked at the gigantic ominous sword in the center, and said indifferently, Previously, you said that there was a reason why the lady called Ling Qing you did not want you to take out the swords in the sword sheath. Now that the power of the ominous sword has increased, the 108,000 swords in the sword sheath are already having a hard time resisting the qi of the ominous sword. If you take away these swords, I am afraid the qi will become even stronger. Now, what we need to do is not to repair the sword formation. The sword formation does not need to be repaired. What we need to do is to strengthen the sword formation. Strengthen? How do we strengthen it? Go find a new divine sword and place it in the sword case to suppress the evil sword. The sword ancestor said solemnly. Since that's the case, I'll send someone to search for it. Grandmaster, do you have any requirements for the divine sword? Are you referring to the requirement for the sword to be placed in the sword sheath? Yes. It can be said that the requirements are high, but it can also be said that it's not high. It just needs to satisfy one thing, and that is to have spirituality. Spirituality? Su Yun was slightly startled. Yes, it has spirituality. No matter what kind of sword it is, strong or weak, immortal or ordinary, as long as it has spirituality, it can be placed into the sword sheath and inserted into the sword formation to resist the evil sword chi and suppress the evil sword. How many do you need right now? I'm not sure about that either. Naturally, the more the better. It's just that it's not easy to find a sword with spirituality. Any sword with spirituality is related to its birth process. If you really want to find it, you need to run through the entire myriad heavens realm. Su Yun was silent. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore, we should still have some time. Su Yun, I remember that when I came to the Martial God Peak, I passed by a place called Tianya Mouth. That place is right on the coast of the Martial God Peak. Rumor has it that there is a Tianya jade in the Tianya Mouth. It is a relic of an immortal who fell. Actually, I have heard of this jade before. It is a legacy precious jade refined by the Cliff Immortal. If you obtain this jade with the energy inside, I believe that you will be able to successfully absorb this strange stone and help your cultivation increase. This strange stone should be able to successfully sublimate, completely mature. Follow me to the Tianya Mouth and retrieve the Tianya jade. Are we going now? What are you waiting for? I'm still injured, Master Ancestor. Sigh, as long as you can walk. Most of the spirit cultivators that are active in the Tianya Mouth are only existences of the Spirit Master. You are already a spirit god. What are you afraid of? Sword Ancestor rolled his eyes at Su Yun. Su Yun was rather embarrassed and laughed out loud. What Sword Ancestor said was right. The existence of the spirit god realm, even in the immortal world, was an incredible person. In a place like the ultimate martial world, it was basically a god. Even if it was an injured god, it was definitely not something that mortals could challenge. How do we get out? Follow me, Sword Ancestor said. He immediately leaped into the air. A cloud shot down from the sky, quickly forming a cloud sword beneath his feet, carrying him forward. From the method of stepping on the clouds, it could be seen that Sword Ancestor's strength had indeed increased by a lot. He did not know what level his strength would reach when all of his 3 souls and 7 spirits were gathered. Peak of Spirit God? Maybe it would be even higher? Su Yun took a deep breath, leaped into the air and chased after him. Due to the battle with the Martial God, the Martial God's summit was already in a mess. Other than the border area, which had yet to be affected, the rest of the place was practically smashed into smithereens. Sword Ancestor came to the southwest corner, where there was a small hill near the sea. The Martial God's summit was completely shielded by the distorted space. If one did not use spatial magic to send it out, and directly flew out, they would immediately be torn apart by the distorted space. Sword Ancestor flew to the top of the small hill, and stared at the distorted sea in the distance. Suddenly, he took a deep breath, raised his right hand, and with a low shout, a sword chi burst out from his palm, fiercely slashing towards the distorted space. Crash! The sword force was like a basin of water that was poured out, directly pouring onto that area, causing that area of space to shake violently. A moment later, the entire area started to twist again, and after 10 breaths of time, the area actually returned to its original state. Seeing that, Su Yun's eyes immediately widened. Sword Ancestor raised his hand and said indifferently, "This sword is called the Spatial Sword Slash. It forcefully converts the immortal energy into spatial energy, and then fuses it with the sword chi, finds the source of its distortion, and slashes it into pieces. The spatial distortion in this area is relatively weak, so it can be easily cut open. Spatial sword slash? Can immortal force be converted into spatial energy? This will require you to have a sufficient understanding of spatial energy. Everything in this world is actually interconnected, even energy. The so-called wind energy, fire energy, water energy, and even earth energy are all the same thing. This is the reason why all things reinforce and subdue each other. Su-Yun, you still have a lot of things to learn. The limitless sword art is just a type of sword technique. It cannot become your everything. Sword Ancestor tilted his head and said seriously. Su-Yun nodded. Chapter 1156. How many people were below, how many trees, how many stones were on the ground, how many creatures were in the forest, Su-Yun could accurately capture them all. However, there was not a single trace of the Tianya jade in this area. However, to Su-Yun and Sword Ancestor, it was still an ordinary valley entrance. The fierce beasts, miasma and the traps left behind by the spirit cultivator in the past were all just decorations to him. These things could not even break the imperial battle robe, much less injure his body. Heaven's Edge's mouth wasn't big, and in a little more than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, he finished looking around. Other than a few places where people were fighting, he didn't see any movement of immortal chi. It should be in the direction of the Sword Ancestor. Let's go take a look. Su-Yun muttered to himself. He changed his direction and flew towards the left side of the entrance. Whoosh! Just then, a few chi suddenly flew over from below and directly struck Su-Yun's body. In Su-Yun's eyes, these few auras were soft and powerless, but according to the average cultivation of the local spirit cultivator, these few attacks were filled with killing intent and were extremely fierce. Patter. A few auras struck his body, but they did not break through his defense. The Imperial Battle Robe directly blocked the profound chi attack. Su-Yun frowned. He looked down, only to see a few men and women hiding behind a big tree. The attacks were released by them. What? My profound chi actually has no effect on him? How is this possible? That guy must be carrying an incredible treasure on him. What kind of treasure could be so powerful? The few of them looked at Su-Yun in shock. All of their faces were filled with astonishment, and none of them recovered from their shock for a long time. Who could be immune to their attacks? Even if he didn't die from this sneak attack, he should at least be injured, right? Su-Yun glanced at these fellows. He did not understand why they wanted to attack him, but he was too lazy to care about them. People of this realm did not want to bother too much with these ordinary spirit cultivator, so he immediately turned around and continued to fly forward. He actually ran away? These fellows thought that Su-Yun would descend and fight with them, but who would have thought that Su-Yun would only glance at them and immediately leave? This was truly out of everyone's expectations. Why did he run away? Are you looking down on us? There's definitely something wrong. Hey, do you think he has the Tianya jade? Otherwise, why would he be completely unharmed after taking Big Brother's attack? There must be. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in such a hurry to leave. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard this. Then what should we do? What should we do? The man called Big Brother was not an idiot. Hearing Su-Yun's words, he instantly understood that Su-Yun had heard everything he said. If his hearing was that amazing, then Su-Yun would have probably heard the conversation between him and his companions. Such a terrifying technique. What realm and what level of cultivation did the profound spirit cultivator have? You actually know everything. Who the hell are you? Do you have Tianya jade on you? The Big Brother asked in fear. No. Then you must have other treasures on you. My attack is not something an ordinary person can ignore. I'm not an ordinary person. Su-Yun's expression turned cold. He casually waved his hand, and a few strands of immortal chi flew out from his palm, directly striking towards these fellows. In an instant, the people in the forest immediately froze, as if they were statues, and within their bodies, a large amount of xian qi was spurting out. A moment later, blood sprayed everywhere, and the bodies of these people were torn apart, as if they were rocks that had been smashed by a fist. One by one, they were turned into chunks of flesh that collapsed, and their souls directly spilled out. Su Yun swept his gaze across the screaming souls, but did not kill them all. Their bodies had been destroyed, so even if they revived, they would only be ordinary mortals, and would no longer have any strength. Originally, Su Yun did not plan to make a move, but the other party planned to kill and steal, so there was no need for Su Yun to be lenient. Chirp! Just at this moment, a ray of snow-white light suddenly shot out from the southwest direction of the heaven's edge. This light shot into the sky and into the cloud. It could be seen from far away, and when this light shot out, a mysterious celestial spiritual energy also came with it. Su Yun's entire body trembled. This aura Tianya Jade? He anxiously swept his gaze in that direction, only to realize that he had searched that place before. Wasn't there no Tianya Jade's aura? Why did such a change happen now? He was extremely puzzled, but he still rushed over. When he got close to the Tianya Jade, a person quickly flew over from afar. It was Sword Ancestor. Other than that, a large number of spirit cultivators from all directions were also attracted by the change in the Tianya Jade. Did you use immortal power just now? Sword Ancestor glanced at the place that was glowing with light and asked Su Yun. I just killed a few boring people, Su Yun said. After Sword Ancestor heard that, he stared at Tianya Jade, and after a moment of silence, he said, Sure enough. What's wrong? Tianya Jade, you actually found it by chance. I found it? That's right, you found it, because this change was caused by you, Sword Ancestor said. Su Yun was confused. What does this have to do with me? You used immortal chi to kill people, and when the immortal chi you released was stained with blood, it would stimulate the enchantment on the Tianya Jade that was buried in the mouth of the Tianya Jade, causing a change and exposing the Tianya Jade. Is that so? This is most likely what the immortal did before he died. What's the purpose of doing this? Let the Tianya Jade return to the immortal court. Why is it related to the immortal court again? The more Su Yun listened, the more confused he became. However, Sword Ancestor's next words made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Immortals cannot casually start a massacre in the myriad heavens realm, because a powerful force can allow them to destroy the balance and order of any realm, hindering the normal development of this realm, so the immortal court has a rule that they are constantly monitoring the various realms. If such a thing happens in any place, the immortal court will definitely send people over, and if my guess is correct, the dead immortal might have other methods to inform the immortal court to rush here. Perhaps the people from the immortal court are already on their way. Sword Ancestor's voice was heavy. At this critical juncture, if they were to provoke the immortal court again, it would not be a good thing. Let's hurry up and go. Yes, take the Tianya Jade and return to the peak of the martial god realm, Sword Ancestor said, and then headed towards the place that was glowing. Su Yun did not want to face the people of the immortal court at all. Furthermore, he was currently injured. It was easy for him to deal with the people of the ultimate martial world, but if he were to deal with a powerful immortal, then the situation would be different. The place that was glowing was a large rock covered in moss. The large rock had already been split into two, and the light was coming out from the crack. Sword Ancestor carefully took out a light green jade stone and held it in his hand. He nodded at Su Yun, then leaped and flew away. Su Yun immediately followed. After obtaining the Tianya Jade, the next step was to use the strange stone left behind by the martial god. He did not know what that strange stone was, and what kind of miraculous effect it would have after digesting it. Su Yun's heart was filled with inexplicable anticipation. The reason why the martial god had entered the peak of the martial god realm for so long was because of this stone. Sword Ancestor seemed to have noticed something. His face immediately revealed a surprised expression, and he shouted out loud, "Heavenly Beast Stone? What's that?" Su Yun asked in confusion. "It's a strange stone refined according to the ancient books of the primordial age." The sword master circled around the mystical stone, carefully looking at the beast mark on it as he circled it. "You have to know that there are thousands of methods in this world, and many things that do not seem to have any offensive capabilities, under the refinement of people, can often display incredible power. In fact, this power is not given by people, but by the refiners themselves. They dug out the power contained within these things, which is why they have such an effect. There are countless spirit beasts, fierce beasts, demon beasts, magical beasts, and even divine beasts on this strange stone. In fact, each of these patterns is added by the soul of a living creature. For example, this three-horned sheep, it was not carved by humans, but by someone who killed the three-horned sheep, and then imprinted its soul on this strange stone, which formed this pattern, and this beast imprint contains all of the three-horned sheep's power. Sword Ancestor said seriously. Hearing that, Su Yun sighed. There's actually such a magical thing? These beast souls have already fused with the strange stone. If they are not absorbed, they will be absorbed by others. The power contained in so many beast souls is definitely limitless. The reason why the war god placed this strange stone here is also because the essence of the sun and moon, the spirit of the world, can completely release the potential of these beast souls, and now that the energy of this strange stone has reached its peak, it is a good time to absorb it. As Sword Ancestor spoke, his eyes were still staring at the strange stone. He never thought that this stone would be so powerful. With so many beast marks, it meant that so many fierce beasts, spirit beasts, magical beasts, and so on had all been killed and their souls sealed within. How much time and energy would it take to infuse all of these tens of millions of beast souls into it? What? Just then, Sword Ancestor suddenly cried out in alarm. Su Yun was startled for a moment and immediately ran over, only to see Sword Ancestor staring intently at a beast mark on the strange stone, his eyes almost unblinking, his expression especially focused. However, from his eyes, it could be seen that the beast mark he was looking at was not simple. Actually, whether it is public or private, I think that the divine dragon race did not do anything wrong, but the traitorous dragon was too radical. It immediately planned to escape with the wind divine feather. The divine dragon race and the divine eagle race chased after it, but they were unable to capture it, so the traitorous dragon was naturally expelled from the clan by the divine dragon race. The traitorous dragon's heart was filled with resentment, so it broke off all the dragon horns on its head and swore that it would definitely take revenge in the future and completely eradicate the divine dragon race and the divine eagle race. To be able to escape from the hands of the divine eagle clan and the divine dragon clan, it can be seen that the strength of the traitorous dragon is not simple. However, who killed it? The martial god? It's hard to say. If the traitorous dragon is injured, the martial god might succeed. If the traitorous dragon is at its peak, even 10 martial gods would not be able to take down the traitorous dragon. The traitorous dragon is being chased by the two clans, and there will be many battles along the way. It's also possible. Su Yun nodded his head. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, Sword Ancestor, since you said that the Divine Dragon Clan and the Divine Eagle Clan are so powerful and belong to the higher echelons of the immortal world, then, can the immortal court control them? Yes. The Sword Ancestor said without hesitation. Su Yun was startled. The immortal court is huge. Do not underestimate this existence that represents the laws of the immortal world. The immortal court that you have seen is just the tip of the iceberg. Alright, Su-yun, go and make your preparations. I will take a look at this strange stone. Maybe there are some other incredible beast imprint. After today, you can start absorbing them. What's the use of absorbing this strange stone? It will greatly increase your strength, and then it will allow you to have the ability to transform into anything. Myriad transformations? Could it be? That's right. The sword ancestor pointed to the beast imprint and said, whatever beast imprint there is, you can transform into their appearance and possess all of their abilities when they were alive. For example, the traitorous dragon, you can also transform and possess all of its powers. How is this ability? How should I describe it? The people of the mortal realm like to use the word ox to describe it. Then it's awesome. Su-yun jumped up, his eyes lit up as he stared at the strange stone. Myriad transformations? How could this be? If he absorbed this strange stone, wouldn't he be able to go anywhere he wanted in the heavens and the earth? Although he could use the immortal chi to transform into some simple animals and plants, that was only a basic trick, an illusion technique, and was useless.